Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen in the public gallery and council officers. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee. We've got a few housekeeping details to go through first, and that is that if the fire alarm sounds, everyone should leave the building using the nearest emergency exits. Elected members and staff should make their way to the usual designated fire assembly point on Tay Street. To remind all councillors and officers to use microphones and request all attending this meeting ensure that all mobile devices and other communication devices are on silent. That's me done with my air hostess bit. Can I remind everybody attending the meeting that these are now recorded and will be available on YouTube on the council's website following the meeting. Prior to us having the formal business, I would like to just make comment that yesterday a number of us attended the formal opening of the Barbara Vaughan Den for Young Carers within the new PCAVS Carer Centre at Lewis Place. It was very moving for those of us who had been colleagues of Barbara's to be in attendance. She was a remarkable woman who it was a great privilege to have as a colleague. But one of her biggest passions was young carers and making sure in particular that they had every opportunity to develop their academic achievements so that their caring responsibilities didn't get in the way of their future successes, and particularly when it came to school. So to see an actual physical space dedicated to Barbara's memory is something that I'm really pleased that we've been able to deliver. And I really would like to thank the council officers that took the idea and the money that was put aside in the budget and made a reality of it, and it's a lasting living legacy to Barbara. So thank you in particular to Hazel and Sheena and Jackie and all the other officers that were involved in delivering that. I'd now like to ask Sheena Devlin, our Executive Director, to provide an update on the closures of Blaringone and Green Loaning Primary School.
Convener, thank you very much. I would like to draw committee's attention to pages 6 and 7 of the volume of papers that you have in front of you, and that is of the minute of the Lifelong Learning Committee meeting on the 27th of March this year, where the 164 mentions the statutory consultation in relation to Blaringone, and 165, the statutory consultation in relation to green loaning primary schools. We received formal notification yesterday from the Scottish Government that the decision of the Scottish Government is not to call in either of the schools, and that there are no conditions attached to either case. The letters from the Scottish Government will be available, if not already, but certainly from later on today on the Scottish Government's website, so anybody can access those. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Sheena. Can I now ask if there's any apologies and substitutions for this afternoon's meeting?
Convener, we have apologies from Councillor Purvis, and the substitute is Councillor Ellingworth, and apologies from Councillor Reid, the substitute Councillor Ahern.
Thank you. Can I ask elected members if there's any declarations of interest in respect of the business this afternoon? No? Thank you. Moving on to item 3, which is deputation requests. I've had a request from Councillor Alistair Bailey to address the committee as local ward member regarding item 5, which is the report on the statutory consultation on Abernite School, and from Mr Gerald McGoldrick, the chair of the Abernite Parent Council, to address the committee on the same item. Can I have the committee's agreement to hear these deputations? Thank you. Can I have the committee's further agreement to vary the order of business to hear from Councillor Bailey and Mr McGoldrick immediately before item 5? Thank you. Moving on to the minutes. Can we agree the minute of the meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee of 27th of March 2019? And can we note the minute of the Executive Subcommittee of the 25th of March 2019? Thank you very much. Which brings us on to item 5 in your papers, which is the statutory consultation on Abernite Primary School. Can I remind members that when it comes to the deputations, that you may put any relevant questions to Councillor Bailey and Mr McGoldrick, but they should not express any opinion on the subjects until each deputation has returned to the public benches. Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Alistair Bailey to come forward and address the committee? Councillor Bailey, you'll have up to 5 minutes, and Councillor Wilson will keep time and give you a kind of 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Good morning, committee members. Good afternoon, even. When first included in this review, the story of Abernite was all doom and gloom. There were only 5 children at the start of the 2017 term against a capacity of 44. However, the official projection for this summer is now 10 children, and I have written confirmation that additional parents intend to send 2 further children this year if that threat of closure is lifted. That is a material change in circumstances. That means that the school roll has risen from 5 to 12 under threat of closure. That's a 140% increase in the school roll under threat of closure. What could the school roll be if there was no threat of closure in the air? We've got to where we are today due to several factors. The previous administration was warned by the then chair of the Parent Council in 2012 that the falling school roll made a catchment review necessary to secure the future of the school. That didn't happen until 6 years later. By that time, a trend had already been set in motion for children from Abernite catchment area. By that time, a trend had already been set in motion for children even from the Abernite catchment area to be placed elsewhere. We also need to be realistic about the future demand for primary schooling in Abernite, where the population demographic has changed in recent decades. I accept that the current capacity of 44 is too much for this location. The school employs only 1 member of teaching staff, therefore why not reduce the stated capacity to a sustainable level and remove the threat of closure? It surprises me that we have not explored simply mothballing a classroom to take the capacity down. If the capacity were brought down to 22, then this school would be at 55% capacity and ready to grow with that threat of closure lifted. The addition of nursery provision was not included in the options appraisal either. This council had the opportunity to go to the Scottish Government for capital funding. We did not do so for Abernite. There's a trend across the piece for kids who want to stay on where they've had their nursery provision. Although I don't sit on this committee, and I can only appeal to those of you who do, it strikes me that given this material change in circumstances, you consider instead an option of reducing the school's capacity to give it and the community a sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Can I ask if there's any questions for Councillor Bailey? Councillor McDade, then Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Bailey, you talked about there has been an increase from 5 to 12 for the coming year. Have you, as a local ward councillor, experienced indications from others that in future years this is likely to grow as the school role, as the catchment grows?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I have. So there's both evidence of that within the papers that I believe the Parent Council Chair has circulated with you that look a bit like this on the front. And also the thing that makes me believe that will be the case is that if we look at Abernite, it has a long history of parents from within the existing Abernite catchment requesting placement out with. And from speaking with those parents at the consultation events and in the general community, they cited concerns about the future of the school, concerns about the then makeup of the school when it was only 5 children, all of whom were male, and those things I think would contribute to that.
Definitely. So basically, with from what you're saying, with the growing school role, it's much more likely now from the mood of the community that more people are likely to send their children to Abernite, including people who currently might be on placing request elsewhere.
Exactly, that's my firm belief.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Bailey, you said just a second ago the demographics of Abernite have changed. Can you outline what has changed about the demographics of Abernite for us?
I don't have references for this assertion, but I think it's fair to say that rural areas across the piece have fewer young children in them these days than they did at one time. At one time we had individual schools at Abernite, at all of the villages around about as well. But now we have a situation where Abernite is the one surviving of those rural schools in the Cars. and we see that there is a general decline in the number of kids living in rural areas. So therefore, we need to ensure that the schooling we have there is sustainable, and I believe that this change in the numbers means that we can make it sustainable.
Thanks. I have a second question. The paperwork that we've all seen, I guess you've seen as well from the Parents' Council, talks about bias in the survey that was done. What's your views on that? Do you feel that was a biased survey?
I don't know which specific survey you're referring to.
Sorry, Councillor Bailey, it was the original survey done when the council were seeking to find out if people within the proposed enlarged catchment area would come to Abernight. And there's some documents that were sent to me, and I suspect yourself, some time ago, saying that that survey was biased, and just wondered if you agreed with that or not.
I don't have those details to hand, so I won't be drawn on that. I don't have any comment on that.
Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bailey, you speak about growing numbers. Can I ask how much time you've spent with education officers analysing the figures to make sure they're absolutely accurate?
So the figures I've quoted when I spoke today were the figure of 10 at the very start of my speech is in the report that you have before you. The number of 2 is one parent with 2 children who have told me in writing that if the threat of closure is lifted, they will put a placing request in for the coming term to move those children in. So from that point of view, I feel those numbers are robust. I know that there is a larger group that maybe the Parent Council Chair will speak to after me. But in terms of that, the numbers I quoted, to be clear, are the 10 from the report plus 2 further children whose parents tell me they'll put in a placement request.
Can I ask, to draw you further, but you personally have not spoken to any educational officers about the figures?
I did in the run-up to the previous consultation when we were first considering the options for this school.
Is that way back in before the consultation actually took place?
No, it was while we were in the options appraisals at the beginning of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pover.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Bailey, isn't it a consideration that proposed development in Insture will add significant pressures to Insture Primary School?
Yes, you're quite correct, Councillor Pover. That is a concern locally that I believe the papers you have in front of you say that after this change, Insture Primary School will reach something like 95% capacity. And speaking as a parent of 2 children in Insture Primary myself, I'd agree that is a concern that school will then be not quite full, but very full.
Thank you. Might I draw you further on that comment you made, Councillor Bailey? Are you arguing then with the figures that are in this report that would indicate that that's not the case? I haven't got the exact page number in front of me, but the capacity and the likely roles at Insture and other primary schools. Do you dispute the figures that officers are
No,
given?
I'm not disputing those. I said I believe the officer figure in the paper is 95%. I may be misremembering that, but my comment was merely an observation that 95% puts the school not at capacity, but it's very full by the time a thing reaches 95% of its capacity, was my observation. So I'm not conflicting what's in the paper. I'm just giving a commentary that I feel 95% is pretty full.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks for your presentation, Councillor Bailey. I think a couple of points initially. You mentioned catchment areas way back in your earlier remarks. Are you aware that the Parent Council of Abernight Primary School had made previous requests to the then convener and vice convener of the Education and Lifelong Learning Committee to review the catchment area in order to enhance the potential area where pupils would be sent to Abernight?
Yes, I'm aware of that. That was in 2012, I believe.
And do you know what the response was from the then council to that request?
It was essentially, I don't remember it word for word, but it was to the effect of declining to do it at that time and saying that this will be done at some date in the future. And one of my concerns, as I mentioned, is that that wasn't done for 6 years.
Okay. And referring back to the report, and the convener referred to the figures in the report provided by the officers, there has been a steady decrease in the number of children at Abernight over the past 10 years. That's just a piece of fact. Would you agree?
I would disagree to the extent that there had been a steady decrease up until the point where this was included in the review, which was, I believe, 2016 or 2017. But then my point is that we've then seen a rise over the past 2 years. When this school was included in the review, first of all, it was at a pupil roll of 5. It then went increased last year, and then the officer projection for August of this year is now 10. So I agree that there was a steady decline. But then over the past 2 years, there has been an increase. I don't know whether we call it a steady increase after 2 years, but there have been 2 years of increase to my understanding.
But just going over the past 10 years in total, there was a diminution in the number of children attending and at Abernite, and a number of these children who are now attending in Stewart were from the Abernite catchment area. Is that correct? That was before any discussion about the School Estates Review took place.
Could you clarify your question, please, Vice Convener? What's the question?
Yes, I'm looking at the historical pattern of the number of children attending Abernite Primary School over the last 8 to 10 years.
Yep.
Not the immediate last 2 years, because clearly there's been a discussion on the Estates Review in that time. But you've acknowledged yourself that the number did decline, but that was prior to any discussion about the future of the school.
Yep.
That included a small number of children who were whose parental homes were within the Abernite Primary School catchment area, attending in Stewart Primary. Is that correct?
Yes, I acknowledge that there are pupils within the Abernite there are pupils within the Abernite catchment who are attending in Stewart at the current time, and we know that some people would want that to continue. That's parental choice. However, if you're to the part of the question about the 10-year trend, I would characterise that, if we're considering a 10-year trend to date, I'd characterise that as something like a hockey stick. I agree there was a fall and there was a drop from 2009 onwards, but then recently in these past 2 years we've seen the tail of the hockey stick there. That's how I would characterise the trend over 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rebick.
Thank you, Convener. Do we, in your view, place too much emphasis on maximum capacity in these reviews and similar?
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. I can only speak for this one. This is the one that I've looked into in depth. And I'd say that, yes, there is an over-reliance on capacity numbers, particularly, as I said in the deputation, when we're stating the capacity of this school is 44, it currently employs just one member of teaching staff. So if 44 children appeared tomorrow, we'd have to hire another teacher anyway. So therefore, I'd argue the effective capacity of this school is 22 anyway.
Thank you.
Do you have any further questions for Councillor Bailey? No? Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Committee.
I now invite Mr McGoldrick, and you'll have up... You'll have up to 5 minutes, and Councillor Wilson will keep time. Thank you.
Closing Abernite Primary School would bring an end to over 100 years of primary education in our village and ripping the heart from our community. Abernite is a great school with a young, dynamic head teacher. One of the reasons for this turning point that you've seen. It's set in an incredible landscape and offers a rich educational experience. We know there's an amazing future for Abernite once the threat of closure is lifted. The Straits Review basis is flawed and was started without the facts in front of you. The Council was not aware that rural schools attract extra funding from the government. All schools in Scotland get at the moment approximately £3,140 per child if they attend a rural school, because it's a rural school, because the government supports rural education. The projected role presented in the closure proposal has been shown to be incorrect. Despite closure, with 2 new boys in January and 4 P1s will start next term, the actual projected role for 2021 is 16. Now, I've sent each of you details of this, including the names. All the confirmations have gone through Angus Forbes, which have been redirected to the Council. During that year, in 2021, We will have 6 P1s starting. P1 to P3, we'll have 12 kids. We're growing the school again, bottom up, as you'd expect. We're an attractive school. You initially voted with a projection the last time I was here of 2021 having 3 kids and 2020 having 3 kids, and the following year 21 having 4. We've not got that. We've got 12 and we've got 16. So you voted last time based on data, which admittedly is hard for the council to get, because all they can ask is people that they know of in the overall area who go to the other schools. We only have 1 teacher, so our capacity is not 44. Our capacity, I think when you have 1 teacher, you've got 17 kids allowed to teach, but whether it's 17 or 22 is kind of irrelevant. As soon as we have 16 kids in that school, we've got a pretty high staff utilisation rate, which I think is a more important figure. You own the school already, so it's all about utilising the staff that you've got. The community impact has been hugely underestimated by the council. Our community does not want this school to close. We're a strong community. We do lots of things. We use the school for the monthly wine club, community cafes, annual pub quiz, annual community barbecue, annual Mary Young lecture, the community company, AGM, the Abernight Festival. We raise thousands every year for charities. We have hundreds of people attend. And the playing field itself. You close a school, we lose all this. We lose all the things that our community has to offer. Cost statings have been overstated and do not show the true picture. The £3,140 you get per child, as soon as we have 16 kids, which we've confirmed, and the information has been sent, the emails have been sent, is equivalent to £50,000. Now, in the report that was put in front of you by the council, this money was not included, because it doesn't go directly to Abernight School, which is true.
A minute left.
It goes to the council. You lose the 16 kids, you lose the 50 grand, yeah? The cost of educating the kids going to Insture has not been included in the report either. If we have 16 kids in the school, we're no more expensive than any other school in Perth and Kinross. Capital costs, which gives you a flavour of the report, were said to be about £300,000. This isn't planned maintenance. This was a mechanical desktop survey. We spent 14 grand in the last 3 years in maintenance. There's no maintenance required for the school. The school building's in good condition. We feel our kids' interests are best served by being educated at the heart of our community and allowing all our children to be leaders, which is not possible in a large class environment. Some parents want their kids to be educated in big classes. Some parents don't. We're the exception. We're the offering to other parts of the Carse of Gowrie. Of those 16 kids that will be here in a few years' time,
could you draw your remarks to conclusion, please?
12 are from the catchment. 4 are not. I sent a testament to all of you from one of the parents who had a kid come from another school, and I hope you had a time to read it. It just demonstrates the thing that we can offer parents in terms of a good school, the confidence building. Don't close our school. Don't ruin our vibrant rural community. Please make the honest and correct decision, not a political one. Our future is in your hands. And thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick. Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick. You're happy to take questions from the councillors.
Yeah.
Can I ask if there's questions from Mr. McGoldrick? Councillor Rebbick.
Thank you, Convener. I know I have a view of the better use of civic buildings, particularly in rural communities. So I'm interested just to tease out a little bit more how much the school's used away from the normal practice of education. If you can elaborate on that, please, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, so every year at the moment we have a festival which is in the playing field associated with the school. We have hundreds of people attend. We've got various events and stalls. We've got music playing. Half the money goes towards a chosen charity. I think we've done Syrian refugees with San Frontier. We have a wine club which happens every month. So there's quite a few of the folk behind me that attend that one. So that gets about 40 people every month. We've got our annual barbecue that we do. We've got our Mary Young lecture, which is all about the history of the Carse of Gowrie and Abernight. We've got a digital archive associated with the website, which captures the whole history of the Carse going back hundreds of years. We've got a book that was written by Mary Young. So all these things have formed through the community that's developed round about this school. So you have the parents of kids who go to this school who form these little strong groups and cohesion that then flowers these wonderful things that we do. We have the pub quiz, which I've won once. Normally folk from Ballindine win that one, unfortunately. We have the playing field itself. The playing field's not owned by the council. So you close the school, you close the upkeep of the playing field, you lose the playing field. We've no more outdoor space. We don't have an outdoor football park or swing park or anything for the kids who live in our community. We have community cafes which are run by the school. So if the school weren't there, they wouldn't be there. So the school offers a lot to the community, to the people who live in the community. We don't have a bus service. So if you live in Abernight, in fact, that's not fair. You have one bus every other day that goes to Perth. So we offer something for the community. We are the community, and I hope that you can see that I've only brought some of them. This is a working day. If this was a weekend, you know, what would it be like then? Sorry. So that's currently what we do with the school.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Forbes, Councillor Baird and Mr Ferguson, sorry, and then Councillor McDade. So Councillor Forbes, Councillor Baird.
Thank you, Convener. Given the correspondence we have exchanged over the last week or so, I'm amazed I actually have anything further to ask you, but I just want to clarify a couple of things. And one of them's a fairly simple thing, and I just missed what you heard. You said something wasn't included in the report, and I didn't catch what you said, and I think you were talking about transport. And I didn't want to interrupt you when you were speaking, but I just didn't quite catch what you said. But maybe if you can't remember, it doesn't matter.
Can't remember.
No,
sorry.
okay, that's okay.
So I'm not used to public speaking.
No, that's okay. This graph,
Yep.
I'm curious as to what the spike is.
Spike's teacher. So as soon as you get above a certain number of pupils in the school, you then have to have another teacher. So that obviously increases the teaching costs.
That's fine.
So basically, with one teacher, we're quite efficient. And then you get to two teachers, you get a little blip, and then you grow the school further.
Thank you.
But it's like I say, we had single sex 5 kids. Yeah, we went away from that. We got a new head teacher. We've become more active as a parent council because we've got this threat of closure, and we think, wow. So we're growing the school. We're away from single sex. We've got a bigger school role. We're more attractive. That's really what's been happening, and that's what I tried to explain to you the last time I spoke. I was trying to tell you what is happening and what will happen, and that is exactly what has happened.
One more question, if that's okay. Thank you. You talked about the playing field, and I'm a bit confused about this. Can you explain exactly who owns the playing field? Because I accept in the report from the council that they've accepted that something they said was incorrect. So you said it's not owned by the council, but there seems to be a bit of dispute about the heritage company or something. Can you give us the cold hard facts on who owns the playing field? So
the hard facts are it's owned by four sisters, if you like. One is now dead, so it's owned by a family who gifted the use of the playing field while the school was still there, and that's happened for the last 40, 50 years. So it's currently owned by a few people who are in the audience right now.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want their names?
No, it's fine. No, I just wanted to explore this this potential lack of access to it? Because I was talking to someone in Abernite on Thursday who told me it was owned by the Heritage Company,
No,
but you're
that's
saying
not
that's
true.
So is there a link between the Heritage Company and the field at
There's
all?
no
Or
link
there's
at
no
all.
link at all?
No.
Okay, thank
No.
you. That's me done. Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Mr McGoldrick. I listened to the answers that you gave to Councillor Rebecca. It seems to be quite a lot about the community. So, and I note that the community, you have a community development trust in Abernite, which seems to be quite vibrant and lots of things going on. So if this committee today decided to close the school, this building would become available. So this could be an opportunity, would you not agree, for the Development Trust to take this on themselves, and you could still have all these things you wanted, your wine club, your barbecues, your pub quiz, your community cafe.
I think
also, if the, just let me finish,
Sorry.
and if this field belongs to people in the area, they might be more than happy, and this could be a wonderful asset for the community. So the closing, you never really mentioned about the education needs of the children. It's more about the community needs. So would you agree that it's still a possibility for the community to thrive?
I think the asset's a wonderful opportunity for you as a council. You grow the asset, you reduce your costs. You grow the asset, you provide additional capacity for a growing population. The population needs to grow further to support, and I think this has been recently in the press with the government, Scotland needs to grow its overall population to support its ageing population demographic. We're only going in one direction. So you grow the school, you get extra funding from the government. You then have the capacity. You've got full utilisation of the staff. We as a community want the school, we want to use the school out with school hours when we can, but that's what we believe. The educational benefits, our kids are confident. Our kids get involved with every other thing that happens in the cars, where only a select few from larger schools do. All our kids play in orchestras. All our kids have fun. They all play sports. There's a lot of things that our kids get that kids in larger schools don't get. And it is true that if you go to a large school, there's some things that you get from that as well. But these are choices. You close the school, you're removing that choice. You close the school, you're going to ruin our community.
Mr Ferguson, followed by Councillor McDade.
Mr McGoldrick, just a very small point. I understand there have been problems with social housing in Abernite that has been given to those without families. And could you explain a little bit about that, and maybe something about house development in Abernite so that it might assist your growth projection?
So my growth projection isn't based on any housing. It's based on confirmed emails from parents that have been sent to the council via Angus. But in terms of the social housing, there was one house that came up for rent, and it wasn't given to a family. And I believe that's because the council has a waiting list. There is more building. So there's 3 buildings that are currently being sold. I'm not sure who's bought them. There's a building plot which has been just bought and being developed. There's another plot which is for sale. So there is organic growth within the community in terms of building. We as a community would be, and a parent council would be more than happy to grow the school to its capacity of 44 by working with the council, and I believe we can do that.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr McGoldrick, for your statements today. I'd like to sort of probe something that you haven't talked about this time, but you did mention briefly, I think the last time you spoke to the committee, which is pupil destinations. So I think you told us last time that a lot of the pupils have gone on to very positive destinations, and some people often view that a larger school offers better opportunities, socialisation, etc. And indeed, there was one of our youth reps who was on the committee the last time mentioned that they actually were friends with someone who had attended Abernight. They were the head boy or head girl at Perth High at the time,
Yep.
showing that there were plenty of opportunities. And when I visited the school last year, met with the head teacher and wandered around the building and met some of the pupils, and it was, you know, they were really passionate about what they were doing. A lot of them are involved with music. I think all of them at that point were taking music lessons, etc. So could you tell us a bit more about the positive destinations that some of these children have gone on to?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be actually better to speak to some of these guys for the kids that were previous generations, but the ones that I know of, because I've only been in the community for 13 years, so I think it's fair to say that most of our children go into either higher education or professional jobs. All the kids at the moment, they all play in all the central group orchestras or the Perth Youth Orchestra. They're all, as far as I can tell, projecting to go to university at a high level. They all are confident and outgoing. Previous generations currently work in the oil industry, work in IT, work in medicine. I guess the demographic or the ruralness of the areas change because it's all been mechanised now. So a lot of the jobs that we now do are in 9 wells, and more so going forward. And this is where I think the rural thing will change. As soon as you get the digital economy coming in, as soon as you get the connectivity for rural locations, then I think you'll find that you'll have more younger people seeking careers in these areas, moving away from the cities again. So again, I think this is another reason for keeping rural schools vibrant and open. And they're part of the nature of Scotland. I mean, we don't all live in cities. Sorry.
Just a supplementary, if I may. Just, I think that is a very good summary of, and you talked about the digital economy there, and have you had, as obviously fibre broadband, etc., is rolled out, have you had indications from perhaps, indeed you've mentioned some former pupils who are here, etc., whether they intend to send their children to Abernight should it remain open?
So some of the parents who have got back in touch, who want to send their kids to the school, are people who used to go to the school, who are moving back into the area. So I think you've got that life cycle. So in terms of the other kids who are maybe at childbearing age, I don't really have much contact with them at the moment, sorry.
Thank you very much.
And I couldn't speak for my own kids because they won't have kids for a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGoldrick. Oh, we'll have a final question from Councillor Wilson.
Convener, you might indulge me, I've got one or two questions. Mr McGoldrick, first of all, thanks for your presentation. Were you aware of the previous request from the Parent Council about a review of the catchment area? Would you like to comment on that?
So we made a request, I guess it was the date that Alistair said if we could have a catchment review, because we were aware of a downward trend with the school and we wanted to have a sustainable future. So we made a request, and at that point I have no idea how these committees work. So the request was fed back by our councillor, person before Angus, that
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, Mac, sorry. That it was turned down, so yeah.
So that request from the previous council was declined?
I believe so, yeah. I don't know who declined that. Sorry, I got the feedback from
the council. It was
from our councillor, yeah.
Declined. Okay. I want to ask you a bit about the numbers that you've projected on your table here. The numbers at the school at the moment are, according to this table, there's 8.
That's correct.
Is that correct? There's 10. And in 2019-20, that was 2018, 2019. 2019 to 2020, which is the year, I presume these are the education years rather than the calendar.
Sorry,
okay. I see the total is 12.
12, yeah.
How many of these are placing requests?
So,
I'm deliberately not mentioning any of the names.
No, that's okay. No, me neither, right? So one of them is a placing request because they won't live in Abernight. 2 of them are currently placing requests because they're moving to rent until they can find a house in Abernight to live. Yeah, so one would be a permanent placing request type thing, and 2 of the kids would be temporary until they get a house that they want to buy in Abernight, which is what they're looking for.
Okay, so there's three placing requests.
But
Have these placing requests been made? Do you know factually if they've been made now?
I know of 2 of them, yes. I don't have any other information on that.
Okay. And going on then to 2021,
Yep.
The figures you've given are 11. How many of these are placing requests, do you know?
So that would be 4, I think.
Okay.
I'd need to confirm. But it depends but I would assume by that point, I was going to say the name, sorry. The 2 kids who want to live in Abernight would have found a house then, so that number would be less. Yeah, we're a couple of years down the line. And this is where it gets difficult for the council, because they don't have the details of the kids who are younger, who are currently 3 years old, who either live in the area or whatever. That's why Angus approached me. Can I give him the names, the dates of births, the addresses of all these children? And that's what I've done. So you have all this information. And that's why when you see the P6, the 2021 roll, there's 6 P1s, there's 2 P2s, there's 4 P3s. It's bottom heavy. That's showing you how this school is growing. Kids send their kids to school at P1 stage. It's unusual for them to send them at a higher stage, unless, of course, they've got difficulty somewhere else or they're moving into the area. The school's growing. It's a great school. The teacher's wonderful. The community's amazing. Look at us. Some of us, anyway.
Mr. McGoldrick, I'm going to make no comment on anybody's appearance. Be careful about that. You'll be aware that the council, as part of this whole process of looking at the school estates review, carried out a catchment survey on the possibility of extending the catchment area.
Yep.
And did that at some length and fairly extensively. How many parents who were within that potential extended catchment area, which took in Kinnaird and Rate,
yep,
and up to, I think, almost to Glendoy,
yep,
how many parents indicated from that they, if the catchment area was extended, how many parents would send their youngsters to Abernight?
So there was 2 surveys done. The first one, there was quite a few. That was an online one. The second one, there was very few responses from anyone about it. In fact, the only responses that you really got were from parents who had kids settled in Inchture School. So those were the responses you got. There are 44 kids who live north of the A90, yeah? Abernight, it's got a little catchment like this, and Inchture's got a big catchment like this, but surrounding Abernight, because all the catchments that got consolidated after the closures of Rate, of Kinnaird, went to Abernight. Sorry, went to Inchture, because Abernight didn't have the capacity to deal with them. It's a really simple thing. If you wanted to make the school go to 44 again, you just change the catchment. But you do it in such a way that it's respectful of the people who have kids who go to Inchture. You do it in such a way that it doesn't upset their families, splitting them by having the siblings going to one school and not to the other. It's a simple transition you can do if you want to utilise the full capacity of this school. But this school is growing, this school is attractive, and as Inchture School gets bigger and fuller, it becomes less attractive to some parents who don't want to send their children to a really full school.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but you said in the first survey there was quite a few. Now, I don't know what quite a few means.
I don't have the details in front of me, but the first survey, I think, it triggered a response from the council to investigate further because it looked promising. Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. But the next survey, there wasn't a huge response. So this decision that you guys made was based on something like 8 or 9 responses from the whole of the Carse of Gowrie. So that was, and that was why it was fundamentally flawed. and you didn't have access to the parents who had kids at preschool or who were younger.
Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick. I'm going to have to, Councillor Wilson, are you finished with your questioning?
It looks like it, Convener.
Thank you. I'll briefly bring in Councillor Anderson, if you could be brief, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and make it as brief as I can. I was going to say a bit more, but thank you for your presentation and the way you've handled these questions. You've been very articulate. I think basically what's coming through to me is, would you agree that there's a reduction in placing requests for children in Abernite to go outside because the school is far more lucrative for the children that's in the area of its catchment at the moment?
Absolutely. I know the families who've sent their kids to Insture, and I know the reasons for it. I mean, one of the reasons is the fact that there was no boys at the school, and the kid that they wanted to send to the school was a boy. There was only a few girls, so they went somewhere else. So that took that family out. There's another family who had exactly the same situation. They had a boy in their family, and there was only girls at the school. So that stopped them. So that's a couple of families, and that's the reasons for it. There was also 3 families who lived just outside Insture, who were part of the catchment I talked about last time I was here, who wanted to send their kids to Abernite, but they didn't because of the threat of closure. So there would have been another 5 or 6 kids to add onto this list if you had removed the threat of closure. And it's all for the reasons I've talked about. It's for the quality of education that we can offer. It's having a different educational experience, which is not in a big school. I'm not slating big schools. I'm from a big school. They're both different. They're both good. But we should protect our rural schools because we are supposed to. They've got specially protected status under the Scotland Act as part of the legal framework set up by our government.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGoldrick, and thank you for taking so much time to answer questions. Thank you. If I could invite you to... I'm now going to invite Sheena Devlin to introduce the report.
Convener, thank you. By way of introduction, all I would like to say is that in August 2018, the committee considered the options appraisal for Abernite Primary School, and it was agreed at that committee meeting that formal consultation was to be undertaken to allow consideration to be given to the proposal to close the school. The outcomes and findings from that consultation have now been reported and published in the consultation report, along with Education Scotland's report. Additionally, our response to Education Scotland's report is also a matter of public documentation. Both the Council and Education Scotland acknowledge that a significant factor leading to insufficient pupil numbers at Abernite has been in relation to parental placing requests being made for children to attend other schools, including some children from the Abernite catchment area who already attend Insture Primary School as a result of successful placing requests. The report that's been prepared for today demonstrates that we have put in place and followed a robust approach in meeting our legislative requirements, having had special regard to the rural school factors and fully considering educational benefits to current and future pupils. Today, the committee is being asked to consider and approve the proposal to permanently close Abernite Primary School, with pupils therefore then receiving their education at Insture Primary School with effect from August 2020. There are a range of officers here today able to answer questions from committee. We have Carol Taylor, Karen Robertson, Sharon Johnson, Peter Marshall, John Beveridge, Sarah Roger, Greg Boland, myself and Jackie Pepper. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, can you indicate, so I can get an idea of who wants to ask questions, and then I'll try and take it from there. So Councillor Forbes, anybody else? Councillor McDade, right. Councillor Forbes.
Convener, as you would imagine, I have despite being locked in a room for a large part of Thursday, Friday and yesterday with officers from the Education Service discussing this, I still have some questions. I hope you'll allow me a few, but I'll spread them out to give other people a chance.
Can I just clarify, do you want to take, are you going to do them individually or as a block, or?
I'm happy, I think I'll ask a question and let someone else have a shot, and if you're happy to come back to me. Thank you very much. Can I go back to the survey? And there was some talk from Mr. McGoldrick about it. He said something that made me sit up and listen. And some people didn't respond. Did we get a small number of responses to that? Did some people refuse to engage with us? Is there any information we can get on that?
Carol?
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Yes, we had responses from 7 families in the second survey, so we invited families to one-to-one meetings with council officers as a follow-up for the online survey. So we had meetings with 7 families. However, it was not possible to contact the parents of 7 under 5s because the information that we have for under 5s provided by the NHS does not give us names and addresses. Sorry, losing my voice. So we did not manage to engage with all of the families that lived in the area. I have to say that Mr. McGoldrick himself made very great efforts to contact those families as well, including throwing the best barbecue of the year, I think, and basically he wasn't able to contact them or engage with them any more than we were. We did have some meetings with the Inchture Parent Council as well as the Abernight Parent Council to gain local knowledge and see if people could go through word of mouth rather than just through social media, but we were unable to contact those 7 families. And I think that actually the 7 families are not included, or only one of the families is included in information that you have received recently as well.
Could I just try and elaborate on this? And you may not have the information, and I can't find the page in the report, but I got the feeling, I seem to remember there was a bit where some parents of potential pupils, for want of a better term, refused to engage with us. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood that?
To be fair, I think there was only one granny who said, please stop contacting us. We don't want to respond. So that wasn't the general feedback.
Having asked who wanted to ask questions, and I can't remember, was it Councillor Forbes and then Councillor, there was somebody else put their hand up, McDade?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions as well, so I don't know if you're wanting to take them separately, like Councillor Forbes breaks it up, that's fine. Yeah. So the document, the report, the covering report, talks about Education Scotland has identified the proposal has potential educational benefits, and I'm on page 20, although it's referenced multiple times. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on what Education Scotland has identified the potential educational benefits would be, and if they outlined any negatives from the proposal.
Thanks, Councillor McDade. I'm going to ask Sian Johnson to answer that question.
So, Education Scotland indicated that there were many accurate and sound arguments made within the educational benefit statements that the Perth Kinross Council made. They also provided their own report where they stated what these educational benefits are, and they're in your report on page 69, I think, Councillor McDade. They did agree that Abernight children would have access to a wider experience and increased socialisation through being part of a larger school at Inchture Primary. They recognised that opportunities to engage in assemblies and after-school and team events would be increased. It is acknowledged, though, that Abernight provides a very good standard of education and a positive educational experience, but the very low role, while providing space and individual attention for pupils, does present education authorities with a number of challenges. It doesn't afford the opportunities that pupils have at Inchture Primary School to experience the breadth, depth and challenge of curriculum for excellence, and actually to achieve their full potential in terms of the 4 capacities. Within the report, in section 8.3, page 46, there's a detailed summary of the additional benefits that children would accrue by attending Inchture Primary School. And these are in relation to the response to the Education Scotland report, which noted that while we had made very sound arguments, we had overstated some of the educational benefits within our report. And the things that they picked out were the school grounds in Abernight were equally as good as Inchture. The environment for learning was equally as good. And also the fact that they had an eco-school. And what we've stated in our response to that is that while we acknowledge absolutely that all these benefits exist, our view is that we have additional benefits within all of those areas within Inchture Primary School, so that we have a more diverse environment for learning. There's a greater variety of spaces within Inchture Primary School. There are wider access to more activities, to increased socialisation with peer groups, both in and out of class. There are opportunities for learning in different contexts, which are not available at Abernight. Looking at curriculum for excellence and providing the curriculum, and the opportunity to work individually, in pairs, in small groups, and in larger groups, and to share learning across a peer group of people with the same age, and also the opportunity to work with a variety of different ages and stages. We also referenced the fact that Abernight Primary School had an eco group, and Inchture also have that, but they also have many other leadership opportunities for pupils, providing much greater opportunity for that leadership experience of children. And in terms of the space and the environment, our view is that the opportunities for the breadth and challenge that Curriculum for Excellence offers, there are additional benefits in Inchture Primary School.
So supplementary to that particular question, you talked about breadth, depth, challenge, etc., and that Inchture would be able to provide a better opportunity for these in a diverse environment. So just for clarification in terms of Curriculum for Excellence, for my own understanding, what sort of numbers would we consider then would a school need to be to provide that as an actual pupil roll number?
There are no statutory numbers in relation to providing a curriculum for excellence, and as you know, within Perth and Kinross we have a number of small schools, and we strive always to make sure that curriculum for excellence is developed no matter the size of the school, and we've done that very successfully, and as witnessed by some of the testament about Abernight Primary School. There are, however, challenges where we get to very low numbers, which is the situation in Abernight Primary School. And also where, in the case that we've had recently within Abernight, where we've had a single-sex school, it's very challenging for teaching staff and for school staff to make sure that where we're talking about learning experiences, and you need to do a real breadth and challenge within perhaps listening and talking, where you don't have peers that are working at the same level as you or at the same stage as you, it becomes much more of a challenge. And we work to make sure that we overcome some of those challenges, and some of the things that we do are to make sure that children in small schools have a small school network. We look for opportunities for other activities, and we do that, but that doesn't detract from the fact that it's a bigger challenge to do that within a smaller school.
Thank you, Sharon. I have Councillor Pover followed by Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Convener. I would just like to ask that in the report on page 17 it says that currently 6 catchment children that the council are aware of attend neighbouring schools, and I'm just wondering if that's due to the threat of closure hanging over Abernight or for other reasons. I just wondered if we've got any information on that.
Thank you, Councillor Pover. No, we don't have any information for this specific committee. When parents choose to send their children to other schools, they're not required to confirm what that reason is. The point for including that in the report was to say that these are children that we are aware of who have chosen to go to another school that we know of, but there may be more children live within the catchment area who may be in a private school setting.
Thank you. Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just about clarification about the exact numbers we expect at school in this coming year, starting in August, because I presume the children would have now enrolled by then. So have we got a definite number of new starts?
Karen?
Thank you, Councillor Baird. You are correct. We're no longer talking about projected roles when we're referring to August 2019, as children are now registered for schools and placing requests have been made for August. The Council has confirmed numbers in terms of registrations and placing requests for 10 children to attend Abernight Primary School. And within those numbers, 5 of those children are from outside the catchment area.
That's 5 there with placing requests to go to?
Yes.
Okay, can I have a supplementary to that question? We heard from Mr McGoldrick, once it reaches a maximum of 16, would require an additional teacher. So what would happen if we had all these extra pupils who were there and placing requests, not actually catchment children?
I'm switched on now. I'll start, and Karen will be able to provide any detail that I've omitted. We have a staffing standard, which is guidance, and at the point that a school may reach 17 young people, then we would be considering another teacher for the school. What we have, particularly in relation to Abernight, is a situation where when the school roll has fallen and there's not been a definite trend of that falling, we haven't immediately removed a teacher from the school, and they have managed over a period of time, as have other small schools, to maintain a number of teachers, because what we look for are specific trends. So we don't immediately remove a teacher, nor would we necessarily or have to put another teacher in, but we are aware of the demands of a multi-composite class for one teacher, and so we do take all of that into consideration. But what's really important, whether we're talking about a small school or whether we're talking about a large school, some of the broad principles apply regardless. And where the number of placing requests would require additional expenditure on the part of the council, that would be a reason not to approve those additional placing requests. And that isn't just in the case of a small school, that could be in the case of a large school.
I think those of us who've sat on the attendance subcommittee or the placing request committee will be aware of that principle and have seen it in much larger schools. Yeah. Any further? Councillor Forbes, I'll indulge another, and Councillor McDade then. Okay.
Convener, I hope you'll indulge me with a few, because I still have a few questions to go. I just want to pick up on something that's come out from Councillor Baird's question, and I'm just scanning through to see if my arithmetic is good, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I think Mr McGoldrick told us there were 12 pupils coming in the next intake, yet we think we've just heard that the actual number is 10, and I would see a discrepancy of 2. I accept that we can't talk about individuals, but is there any way we can have that clarified as to where the discrepancy lies?
Karen.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. As I indicated when I answered Councillor Baird's question, the Council's confirmed numbers for August 2019 are based on those children who are already in attendance at the school, those who are registered from within the catchment area, and any placing requests which have been made. The list of pupils provided by Mr McGoldrick, stating that 12 children would be going into the school in August, 2 of those children are neither registered nor placing requests have been made, and we have had confirmation that they may not be attending the school.
I'm sorry, it's the meeting, although we have these meetings in public, they're not actually public meetings. Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. The question I was going to ask, I want to talk a little bit about the community of Abernight. Now, I'm aware, as is Councillor Pover, because we discussed it just a few days ago, that there are some people in Abernight who think the school should be closed. And I wonder if the council have had any communication with them, whether that's formally, informally, and if there's anything any information we could get about that.
Councillor Forbes, I will defer to colleagues who've been more closely involved in the actual consultation activity. I have certainly been involved in some aspects of that. Whilst I haven't had that information shared with me, what I have had shared with me is people who have expressed an unwillingness to necessarily present their view in public. So people have said that they hold a particular view, that they think what's being proposed is a sensible approach, but they actually would not be prepared to stand up and say that in public. And some people have said that's because they're worried about what might happen if they do say that. And that has been said to myself and to another couple of officers.
Thank you for that clarification, Sheena. Any further questions, Councillor Forbes now? I have Councillor McDade and then Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank you, Convener. So I want to talk about on page 21, it's the final paragraph for the recommendations of the officer report. The vast majority of those consulted have raised no issues or opposition to the proposal. Now, I'm assuming that includes all of the parents at Inchture who might not have concerns about an additional 8 children, but I'm assuming it doesn't reflect the vast majority of people who have responded from the Abernite community. And I couldn't actually look into this much more detail because there was only a summary of the comments on page 107. It summarises the comments but doesn't actually provide us with the full written thing, so I wasn't actually able to look at what people had said.
Karen Robertson.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor McDade. Yes, you are correct in your assumption that in terms of the total number of people who were consulted as statutory consultees, that does include all of the parents and other statutory consultees related to Inchture Primary School, as it's a directly affected school by the Council's proposal. So the total number does include those. The representations that were made during the statutory consultation were predominantly and mostly from Abernite residents and parents.
So from the responses that were received then during the statutory consultation, which were mostly from the Abernite parents, etc.,
yes,
they did oppose the closure?
Yes, the Abernite parents and community did oppose the closure.
So in terms of just this final paragraph then, and those are the ones that responded to the statutory consultation. So in terms of the statutory consultation, the majority of those who responded were opposed to it?
Yes, the majority who responded were opposed. However, the overall majority, in terms of the total number who were consulted, there was a much larger number of parents and community members consulted who did not respond, but those who did respond opposed.
Sorry, so just to clarify then, is that meaning that if 2,000 people don't respond, we're counting them as positive or giving no comment, as opposed to actually saying 23 people opposed it and 2 people didn't give comment?
We are accounting for the fact that those who did not make any comment did not oppose the Council's proposals, but we have accounted for the ones who did oppose and stated those within the report. However, we are working on the basis that those who were asked, who made no opinion to the Council, were not in opposition to the Council's proposal.
Okay, that seems like quite an odd way to do it, but thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. You'll be relieved to know that one or two of my questions have already been addressed, but I want to go back to the numbers just for a minute, because Mr McGoldrick was quite clear about the numbers according to his projections, or the community's projections. Could I ask the officers, please, are we agreed that the current roll is 8 first? Yes, okay. And just to go to next year, next academic year 2019-2020, Mr McGoldrick indicated that there were 12 people, either pupils at the school or people who had registered with the school or who had made placement requests. We've heard from Karen Robertson, I think, that we only have a record of 10. Is there a reason for the discrepancy between 10 and 12? Because it appeared that Mr McGoldrick felt there was 12 or understood there was 12, and now we're saying there are only pupils registered or placing requests for 10. Has somebody withdrawn, or has somebody changed their mind, or not applied, perhaps?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. No one has withdrawn and no one has changed their mind that we are aware of, so there'll be no withdrawn applications or registrations.
Okay, so the total at the moment is 10? Yes. Yeah. And there's no debate about that, there's no dispute about that? Going on, convener, to the question of house building, because I think Mr McGoldrick spoke about that. We haven't really covered that very much in the questions. Mr Marshall, I think you're buried deeply in the officer ranks there. Could we get a wee bit more information? We heard that there were a number of building plots. There was 3 houses for sale. You might not know about the market state of houses in Abernight, but how many consents have been granted for Abernight or the catchment area rather than just the village itself, and how many of these are likely to be taken up in the next 1, 2 or 3 years?
Convener, the number of valid consents at the moment is 8, 2 of which are for holiday accommodation. 1 is a replacement building. Within that, 3 of them are full consents, in other words, have detail, and 2 are in principle. It is difficult to determine what the market will do. I think, as Mr McGoldrick suggested, there are 3 houses on the market at the moment that have been constructed. We don't know whether they'll be taken up by permanent residents or for holiday accommodation. But as an indication, in the market in the last 5 years, there has been 1 house completed. So it is not a buoyant market in that area, but things can change as market conditions change throughout the years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'll be quick again. It was suggested that one of the classes could be mothballed in Abernight. How realistic is that? And are we currently working with just 1 class and 1 teacher, or have we got 2 classes working at the moment?
Councillor Anderson, one of the important things that we need to do as a council is make best use of the resource. We have had situations before where the capacity of schools have been altered, for example, where there have been part of the buildings that are life expired. In the case where we don't need to take that kind of action, we would not be seeking to reduce the overall useful footprint of the school for educational purposes, and therefore the suggestion of mothballing a classroom would be an unusual one and probably unhelpful to the day-to-day running of the school. Currently, just now in the school, the space can be utilised for different reasons by different people, different groups of young people, but we would not be seeking to mothball part of a school and not have it used. It would be pointless to have a council asset that wasn't used when it could be.
Thank you for that.
Do I have any further questions, Councillor McEwen?
Thank you. Councillor Wilson obviously got replied to his question regarding accurate numbers for the school that have been registered, etc. But I'm aware, with placing requests in all our schools, that there's a degree of flexibility around for families to move into areas during the year and have this level of, because there's always unknowns and even the weirdly sounding unknowns which go on when it comes to requests. For larger schools, say like in Stewart, that are nearly 300 pupils, 2 or 3 kids coming or going throughout the year is a very small impact on the school. But the nub of what we've discussed today regarding Abernight, 2 or 3 kids could make all the difference of whether the school's viable or not. So is it just that in Abernight, is my perception of these numbers and it being a numbers game mean that it's actually Abernight's been unfortunate in the fact that small variances that we can't measure, we can't know about, are affecting the pupil numbers and the ability for the school to be viable, those sort of flexibilities that wouldn't be around for a larger school.
Councillor McEwen, there's always lots of variability, and of course there is the right for parents and carers to make choices about where their young people, their children and young people are educated, and that can change. That of course is not static, and that's something that we all live with day and daily. You remember that the premise of the school estate review was around looking at not just the condition and suitability of buildings, but also the capacity. And the capacity, if it's 10 pupils at the start of next session, would be 23%. So you would need a significant number of additional young people coming in to boost the capacity of the school. But fundamentally here, the decision for the committee is one that needs to be based on the educational provision and the securing, the legal duty that the council has in terms of securing best value across the piece.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Councillor Forbes, the final question.
I promise, convener, and I hadn't intended to ask it because I didn't know we had an expert from planning here. So I wonder if I could ask a question about the planning, the housing market, and follow that up with an education question. There's some house building coming on stream in Stewart. Now, I know there's debate about the number of houses. Can you give us any information on where that is right now? And then I'll have a supplementary to that, please.
Convener, there is a planning appeal ongoing for Moncur site, I think it's called it, in Stewart. The debate is over the numbers. It is an identified site in the development plan. However, the applicant choose to take the appeal on the basis of non-determination. But the report that had been in front of the committee was opposed to the density of that site. So the basic principles are against the numbers on the site, not whether it is an acceptable housing site. The issues surrounded noise from both the adjacent agricultural business and also from the A90. It has been deferred, the appeal, for some considerable time due to, I understand, illness on the applicant's agent's side, but is now scheduled to be a public inquiry in July, so we wouldn't expect the results until perhaps late August, September from that. So it's a bit unclear what the final outcome would be. It's speculation, but we would expect that site to be developed for some housing at some point in the future, but probably less than the numbers that the applicant appealed for. But that decision is not within our control. If it was developed, it's likely to develop over a 2, 3, 4 year period. As you suggested, the market will fundamentally affect the delivery timescale for a site like that. Suggestions are that the market is not as buoyant as it is in the main urban centres, and you know, particularly in Perth in our context. So that's why I would say it would be rather a slow build rather than a quick hit if it did go ahead. But there is an element of doubt in terms of both the numbers and the final outcome.
Promise, last question. And from an educational point of view then, what does that do to Instewart Primary School in terms of capacity?
Councillor Forbes, if I could refer you to page 43 of the report. We have provided projected school roles for the next 3 years, making assumptions that the house building goes ahead, house building doesn't go ahead, or the house building goes ahead on the basis of 66 houses. The capacity of the school is 264, so that is extremely tight. However, if I can refer you to page 59 of the report, it shows that Instewart Primary School by 2020 could have up to 11 classes, which would support 314 pupils.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I must have a different set of page numbers because that's not on my page 43, but I found it here. So when you said that, would that mean bringing on stream extra vacant classes in Instewart? Is that what that refers to?
Instewart already has a 10th classroom which can be used for teaching, which we don't include within the capacity. And also, when the nursery is expanded for 2020, the nursery will become available as a classroom within the school.
Convener, could I indulge? Would it be possible to have a 10-minute recess?
I'm happy to grant that. I have Councillor Duff has a question.
I apologise, Councillor Duff.
Councillor Duff?
I had a couple of questions, one of which was similar to Councillor Forbes' last question there. I just wanted to ask about placement requests in recent years and how many of the current 8 pupils at the school are there as a placing request?
Sorry, thank you. Of the current 8 pupils in this school session, 2 of those children are placing requests.
Is that your question? Okay, do I have any further questions? No. Thank you very much for all of that and to the officers for answering the questions. I'm willing to grant Councillor Forbes' request for a recess, but before we get there, I'd quite like to move the report as it stands before you. We have in this paper the detailed consultation report on the statutory consultation on the proposal to close Abernethy Primary School. As convener, I've attended all of the informal and the formal public sessions around this proposal and would like to thank all those who participated, both members of the public and also to thank the team from ECS for all of their work. I would reassure the public, in particular the younger citizens who are here this afternoon, that we councillors don't take any of these decisions lightly, but we have a duty and an obligation on us to ensure that our decisions are based on a robust process which complies fully, as Sheena indicated, with all of the legislation and guidance that is provided to us. As we've gone through the school estate review, there have been different outcomes for different schools as we've moved along, but at each stage we have been fully compliant with all of the obligations that are put on us by the Scottish Government. With regards to the future of the building, should the committee agree to the proposal in the paper today and the closure of Abernethy Primary School and the relocation of its catchment to Inchture, we would give a commitment to the local community that, as with other council assets in other communities such as Straloch and other places, we would work with the community to explore all options for the future use of the building. Importantly, we would work, should a committee be minded to approve the report, we would work with officers to ensure that transition for children is carried out in a smooth, sensitive manner, and our officers and teachers, who are all extremely professional, will have the best interests of all of our young people at the heart. And we have evidence that elsewhere as how well managed that can be for all the young people involved. So with those comments, I'm happy to move the report. Can I ask if I have a seconder?
Convener, we've had a request for a recess. I would, I think, prefer to proceed with the recess before any formal seconding, if that's okay.
Is that, well, I'm just going to check with committee services about the process for this then. Okay. Can I ask Councillor Wilson, I'm getting contrary advice from my right side here. Okay, I have a request for a recess.
Sorry, point of order, if I may. The standing orders only require that it be seconded. It doesn't actually have to be seconded straight away. It could be seconded in half an hour.
I was just getting to with my right-hand side here. Is that in order? Thank you. So with that in mind, I have moved the paper. We're going to have a recess. We'll come back and I'll get my seconder. Thank you. I'm going to grant up to 10-minute recess. Thank you, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move on with the business, and I'll invite, take 2, Councillor Wilson to second my motion.
Convener, thanks very much indeed for the opportunity of the recess. These are difficult decisions. They're hard decisions that we have to make. And I'm conscious of the amount of energy that the Abernethy community have put into this whole debate. However, we had a presentation from Councillor Bailey and a presentation from Mr McGoldrick. It's clear that we're all agreed on the number of children that are currently at Abernethy, and that's 8. And there is a difference of opinion between Mr McGoldrick, who claimed there would be 12, but the fact is that only 10 children at the moment are registered and included in the numbers at Abernite. The blunt question is whether a small school, albeit a well-run one at the moment, is viable in this 21st century that we live in. The schools in places like Abernite were established over 100 plus years ago in a very different set of circumstances, of social circumstances. And we've got to balance out where the educational benefit. This is not about what the budget is. This is not about what you'll save from the potential closure of a school. This is not about the quality of education that's there at the moment versus a school a few miles down the road. This is about, for young people, where the educational benefit, the balance of that benefit lies. And if you think this job that we do is easy, I can assure you it isn't. But my view, having listened very carefully and had some other questions during the recess and time to consider the matter, is that we should proceed with the proposal for closure, because I think the benefit to the educational young folk in Abernite, and bear in mind that a number of parents have already made a choice of moving their children in Stewart, and a number of others may decide to go to different schools, lies in the transfer of the youngsters from Abernite to Stewart, where I think they will benefit from a range of educational experiences that it's not possible to provide in a very small school. Now, that's a difficult decision. It's not an easy one, but it's one that I've given a great deal of thought to and a great deal of consideration to. And therefore, Convener, I second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can I ask if there's any amendments? Councillor Pover.
Thank you, Convener. I am pleased to present this amendment to Lifelong Learning Committee on the grounds that Abernite Primary School has such potential as an education facility in the Carse of Gowrie. Pupil roll numbers have increased to 8 in recent months, and currently 5 girls and 3 boys attend Abernite Primary. These numbers are significant, as roll numbers have not included boys in previous years. Placing requests for August 2019 support the view that pupil numbers will remain stable and are not expected to decrease in the foreseeable future. Members of Abernite Parent Council believe that roll numbers will increase further when there is no threat of closure hanging over the school. Parents would be more likely to consider Abernite Primary as an educational resource for their children if they had confidence in the future of the school. Current pupils are high achieving and have represented the school at competition level in curriculum subjects including maths and music. Head teacher Jennifer Clark remains committed to supporting a varied curriculum at Abernite Primary, and recent reports have been very positive. New proposed housing development in the local area will likely increase the pupil roll of Instewart Primary and add pressure to capacity. Instewart and Errol Primary Schools have already been extended to meet the growing needs of their respective communities. I am happy to support the amendment for Abernite Primary School to remain a vibrant and integral part of the village for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pover. Can I ask if you have a seconder, Councillor?
I do. I'm quite happy to second, and also I'll read out the amendment, and there is copies to be distributed. So the amendment, which I'm delighted to be seconding, is that the committee notes the contents of the consultation report attached as Appendix A. 2, approves that education provision at Abernite Primary School is continued beyond 1st July 2020, and 3, instructs the Executive Director, Education and Children's Services to review the viability of a nursery class within the Abernite Primary School in a year's time to see if this will further help sustain the future role. And just to sort of cover some remarks in relation to this, very much support what Councillor Pover as a ward councillor has said, and also what Councillor Bailey said in his speech when he was speaking earlier about pointing out that there is a material change. There is an increase in the number of children, and that is a trend. You know, most of us would consider an increase over multiple years is a trend, so it is going up. And parents are showing confidence by sending their children to a school that is under threat of closure, and that bucks the trend. Basically, here we were, last time we considered this report, there were 5 children at the school. There are now 8. There are projected to be 10 next year, potentially 12, and increasing numbers as the years go on. I strongly believe that we should be doing everything we can to support our fragile rural communities, and we should be looking to grow them rather than close them. And having visited the school last year, I can say from my own point of view that I think it's an absolutely fantastic school with a passionate head teacher, and I think we've seen today here that there is massive support from the local community for this wonderful school. The difficult decision is not closing the school. The difficult decision is actually how we're going to help sustain our rural communities and help them to grow and thrive and survive. And I think Councillor Wilson previously said about Logie that we would set them a challenge, and if they got their roll up in 5 years' time, that would secure their future. But if they didn't raise it in 5 years' time, that would likely lead to the closure. I think Abernite have risen to this challenge before they've even been set it, proving that there is a viable potential future school role that is going to rise. And I think, from my point of view, that if we are really committed to having options within our education system in Perth and Kinross where people can send their children to small schools, rural schools, urban schools, and actually that choice that these schools offer, we shouldn't be viewing placing requests as a bad thing. That is people choosing to send their children where they feel that their child will best survive. And examples in my ward have shown that a school can go from 11 1 year to about 30 in 2 years' time. So I think that there are plenty of options around how we can grow Abernite's role, and I'm very happy to second this amendment and remain consistent with my position, which is to oppose the closure of rural schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. Can I now ask if there's any comments from members? Councillor Rebick, followed by Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Convener. Before I comment on the specific matter at hand, I think it is important to commend both the officers' work, who has been diligent and professional, as it always has been in the 2 years that I've been an elected member, but also the active community and engagement from the community that we've seen today. I think both are to be commended in equal measure. In respect to the matter at hand, the SNP group here in Perth and Kinross Council has always supported rural schools wherever possible, and I see no exception today. It is about parental choice. Educational benefits are measured in many different ways. And in terms of parental choice, clearly the parents at Abernite Primary School don't see any detrimental education to their kids, or they wouldn't be sending them there. There is, as I've said previously, a very engaged community here, very obviously, and the Rural Schools Act actually does make provision for the community use of school buildings, and it should be taken into account. There's also been lots of very valid questions on what's happened previously in respect of the school estate review in Abernite particularly, but we are where we are, and it's up to 13 members of this committee today, here and now, to decide the fate of Abernite School, regardless of what's gone on in the past. And we have 2 local ward councillors here as well. It's a difficult decision, as has been said, but I would like to support the amendment, and I would like to see Abernite Primary School remain permanently open. Thank you.
Councillor Illingworth, and then Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. In the rural ward I represent, Almond and Erne, there are 7 houses called the Old Schoolhouse in settlements that no longer have primary education. Historically, changes in rural living, such as the introduction of tractors in agriculture, have led to changes to the way rural education is provided. Now, in the ward I represent, despite the changes, or maybe even because of those changes, there is still a fantastic level and quality of education. And the settlements I was referring to are still fantastic places to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. Given the very personalised nature of the campaign, I'm sure you appreciate I have a few things to say about this matter. I think it's fair to say that the Parent Council have run an excellent campaign, and the parents should be grateful to Mr McGoldrick for his time, his enthusiasm and his commitment. Over the last week, I've received something like 10 different spreadsheets from Mr McGoldrick. I've had countless meetings with education officers. I've spent time in Abernite talking to the community. As I referred to earlier, it's fair to say that the community is divided over this issue. I have people tell me to vote to close it. I have people tell me to vote to keep it open. The campaign has become quite personalised to me, particularly over the last week or so, and I can assure you I've had a large number of sleepless nights over today's vote. But this campaign has made me realise that this has nothing to do with politics, it's got nothing to do with votes, it's got nothing to do with banners, it's got nothing to do with photographs, it's got nothing to do with Facebook campaigns. This is about something far more important, and that's the education of young people at Abernight. Now, there's no doubt that there are some educational benefits to a school as small as Abernight, but the piece of the report that talks about the broader range of opportunities to develop their skills is very relevant. Now, I thrived at a small school, but that was 46 children, spread over 3 classrooms. I'd love us to have that in Abernight, but the reality is we don't. I note that the council officers believe the proposal is of sound educational benefit, and from the report it does seem that Her Majesty's inspectors agree. There's no doubt in anyone's mind, whatever the side of the argument you're on, Insture is an excellent school, it's a school I know well and I visit often. But for me, convener, this has always been about the numbers. As I said earlier, Mr McGoldrick has furnished me with detailed data of every child he knows is likely to come to Abernight over the next few years. His numbers differ from the council's. We've already discussed that today. We can't discuss it in public, but we have discussed it in private. But either way, whatever side of the argument you sit on, no one disputes these numbers are very small. Some of the emails are from people who live elsewhere and intend to move back to Perthshire in the future. I've no doubt that that's their intention right now, but things change. So while that's their plan at the moment, it may not come to reality. Conversely, there are families at Abernight who are settled right now and have absolutely no intention to leave, but all it takes is a new job next year. They could be off somewhere else. That's the fluidity of the situation we're dealing with, particularly when the numbers are so small. Now, one lady I spoke to in Abernight on Thursday said her daughter had excelled at Abernight. She proudly said she's a corporate lawyer living in London. This lady went on to say she really wished her grandchildren could go to Abernight School. So this tells us 2 things. People move on from Abernight when they have small children. They look for job opportunities elsewhere. That's the reality of the type of village it is. The other thing we must consider is that today we are debating Abernight School as it is now and as it is tomorrow, and not of the Abernight School of 20 years ago. The world is changing, convener. Nothing as constant as change, I believe is the saying. No longer do we have village doctors or cottage hospitals in every town. Like it or not, that is the reality. Abernight's a wonderful place, a place I would be delighted to live, but someone of my age with no young children. Sadly, the demographics are changing as they do everywhere, and we must accept that. So, convener, taking all of the above and everything we've heard today into account, it's my view that Abernight School should close and the children should go to Insture Primary.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, convener. I think I would agree that it's been an excellent, I wouldn't call it a campaign, but the argument to keep this school open from the community is second to none. And I think that the vibrancy in the community, which has moved the actual school numbers up to 10, and I believe 2 are awaiting the decision, or it could be 12 if the decision goes the right way today. It may be small, but it's very significant. It means that we have a community there that wishes their children to have a good rural education. Now, no one's ever arguing that Abernight doesn't supply a good education, but why shouldn't children be educated as closely as possible to where they live? And I think that if you have 10, 12 or whatever children in this area being educated in this school, you will get less placement requests from this area to go to other schools, because people will have the confidence to put their children to Abernight School. Therefore, I support the amendment. I've always supported the amendments for keeping rural schools open, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, convener. The role at Abernight School has been falling for many years prior to this review being announced. So the large fall in numbers from 21 in 2010 to 7 in 2016 occurred well before any threat of closure. Having heard a lot today on a wide variety of issues connected to Abernight Primary School and the disputed projections for the school's future role, however, we can only go on the facts and the actuality of the situation. and that is that there's a small number of under 5s in the catchment area and little prospect of this changing in the foreseeable future. In the end, it comes down to two things: the Council's duty to secure best value and improving the educational experience of the pupils affected. While we acknowledge the educational benefits afforded pupils at Abernight, we have heard evidence of the additional educational benefits which will be available to these pupils at Inchture if we accept the proposals before us. We must also acknowledge that moving the pupils to Inchture Primary School will not place excessive pressure on Inchture. It's a hard decision before us. We've all given the matter a great deal of thought, and I accept the premise of the proposal and support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Do I have any further comments? Oh, Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'd like to also thank the Abernight community and the officers for the amount of work they have put into this meeting today. Closing a rural school is not an easy thing to do. We have sat here several times, and I, as a local member for an area where a school was closed and the children have now moved on to another primary school without any difficulty. Transition was absolutely first class thanks to the council officials. We've hear today all about this vibrant community, but the vibrant community has still only got a few children at the school. So I think for the benefit of the education of these children, closing is what I would vote for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. In summing up with them before we move to a vote, I would articulate just some of the comments that have been made by my colleagues. I too represent a rural ward and have seen 2 schools close over the 12 years that I've been a councillor under the previous administration. However, what I see in the community that I represent in Strathardle and Glenshee is a school at Kirkmichael which would be smaller than Inchture, but is now absolutely thriving, and the children that have moved there from the Straloch and Stone of Cally settled into their new school environments, and the community that has coalesced around Kirkmichael Primary School brings people in from all of the different areas, and we see that pattern as right across Perth and Kinross. I've welcomed all of the contributions to the debate. I think we've certainly made sure that we covered all of the questions that we all had, and I thank everyone for their participation. This administration does value our rural communities. It does recognise the importance that schools play within those communities, but it also recognises that we face changes in our communities, and that is something we have to fully recognise in conjunction with the legislative and governance guidance that we're obliged to follow. So with those comments, I'll ask Committee Services if we can move to the vote. Thank you.
Councillors, we have before us agenda item number 5, report number 19183, the statutory consultation on Abernight Primary School. We have a motion by Councillor Shires, seconded by Councillor Wilson, to note the contents of the consultation report attached as Appendix A, approve the implementation of the following proposals: that provision of a school at Abernight Primary School be permanently discontinued with effect from 1st of July 2020 or as soon as possible thereafter. The pupils of Abernight Primary School catchment area permanently receive their education at Inchture Primary School from 2nd of July 2020 or as soon as possible thereafter, and the delineated catchment area of Inchture Primary School be permanently extended to subsume the whole delineated catchment area of Abernight Primary School from 2nd of July 2020. We have an amendment moved by Councillor Pover, seconded by Councillor McDade, to note the contents of the consultation report attached as Appendix A. 2, to approve the education provision at Abernight Primary School is continued beyond the 1st of July 2020. And 3, instructs the Executive Director, Education and Children's Services to review the viability of a nursery class within Abernight Primary School in a year's time to see if this will further help sustain the future role. When I call out your name, please tell me if you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Chris Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Henry Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Kathleen Baird. Councillor John Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Angus Forbes. Councillor David Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor Andrew McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor Tom McEwen.
Amendment.
Councillor Beth Pover.
Amendment.
Councillor John Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Fiona Sarwar. Councillor Caroline Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Willie Wilson.
Motion.
The motion is carried 7 votes to 6.
Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the next item, but I don't know whether it would be helpful for councillors to have a brief recess for 5 minutes. Thank you. Before we start again, I've got an apology to make because I've been rather remiss in not welcoming Councillor Duff to his new role as Vice Convener. It dawned on me halfway through the last paper, but I thought I would wait till now to welcome John on board. So you're very welcome to your position as Vice Convener. I'm now going to hand over to Councillor Wilson, who's going to take the next item of business.
Thanks, Convener. We're on item 6, Education and Children's Services Joint Business Management and Improvement Plan and Annual Performance Report for 2018-19, and of course the improvement plans for 2019-20. This is an important report. I'm glad we had a short break, Convener, because we'll be able to draw breath and also take account of the information. There's lots of information here, lots of data. I'm sure there will be lots of questions, and I'm going to ask Sheena Devlin, the Executive Director, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. I am going to do a double-hander here with myself and Jackie Pepper by way of introduction to this report. We'll keep it very brief. This report, as Councillor Wilson says, presents the Education and Children's Services Joint Business Management and Improvement Plan, BMIP for short, 2019-20, and also the Annual Performance Report. It provides a broad and balanced view of service performance over the past year and outlines the ambitious improvement agenda for the forthcoming year. The report quite rightly highlights a number of areas of very good practice, and quite rightly it also highlights areas where there is still room for improvement. I want to draw your attention to the fact that there is a detailed section for the first time in this report coming to this committee in relation to criminal justice. And I'm going to hand over at this point to Jackie Pepper, who's going to just say a bit about that in advance of us answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sheena. Yes, this business management and improvement plan for the first time within Education and Children's Services includes criminal justice social work services, so it has a broader focus. And in anticipation of some of your questions that you might wish to ask on that, I think we are proposing to have a development session probably after the summer now. And it's appropriate that Councillor Ahern's here today as Chair of the Community Justice Partnership, because I think it would be helpful to see some of the linkages and some of the work across criminal justice social work services with that particular partnership. So with that in mind, I think if we can plan something probably after the summer, and we can get into some of the detail of those areas of work at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the introductions over? Thank you. Let's go straight then into questions from members. If we can save the comments for later, please. Questions, and we'll try and take one. Councillor Rebeck, you go first.
Thank you, Vice Convener. If I can refer to page 9 of the report, or page 235 in the big sheaf of papers, it gives me great pleasure. If you can bear with me, I will read a sentence. Attainment across literacy and numeracy at P1, 4, 7 and S3 shows steady improvement based on teacher judgments of CFE, and crucially there are early indications of closing the attainment gap at all stages, which is to be very welcomed. Can I ask though please, because there's work to be done, what further measures will the Council take to further close the attainment gap?
Councillor Rebeck, I'll start off, if I may, and give some general responses to that. And it may be that Sharon Johnson or Roger Hill would wish to contribute to that. There has been significant work undertaken, first of all, to identify where the gaps are, because actually there are gaps rather than one single gap that requires to be closed, and that gap will vary in size and in nature dependent on a whole range of contextual circumstances. What we have found is that the focus of schools supported by investment through the administration to the tune of £150,000 and also through pupil equity funding from Scottish Government. The combination of that additional resource has been very welcome and has enabled schools to work either within their own local management group, across other schools within Perth and Kinross, or indeed with partners across a range of other local authorities who might find themselves in some similar circumstances. And some of that focus has rightly been improving and closing what we know is the gap in terms of receptive language, for example, for youngsters coming into school, because we know that where that gap is wide at the point of youngsters coming into school, they find accessing the rest of the curriculum a significant challenge. And so we've also seen our educational psychology service and other colleagues, other allied health professionals work alongside staff and young people in schools to absolutely focus their efforts there. What we also find, however, is that there's a range of what we might describe as universal supports that can be offered to whole classes or indeed whole schools that benefit everybody, but significantly benefit those in greatest need. And so that is the kind of work that will continue. But through the work of our performance and improvement team, what they've been able to do is provide schools with a really sophisticated data suite that identifies exactly where the gaps are, and schools are becoming much more skilled at using that data, not just to know what the situation is, but to plan for improvements there.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. We are really pleased to show that we have made early improvements in terms of closing the gap. And as our Executive Director says, we've been becoming much more proficient at understanding where those gaps are right the way across our local authority. We've had some good indications that some of the interventions that we've put in place within early years in terms of the language and receptive language that our Executive Director mentioned, that we are having an impact. And again, that is in partnership with colleagues from allied health professionals and others, and our own parenting and family learning team and our early years teams and teachers. And that is beginning to show some really good indications of impact. However, we know from our own data, and again, through our performance and improvement team, we are becoming much more sophisticated in understanding and drilling down into that data, that we have some significant work to do in relation to numeracy and writing across our CFE levels, and certainly in primary, and some of that within S3 as well. That does remain a focus for us, and we are looking very much at those universal approaches as well as the targeted approaches. The things that we're continuing to do and that are contained within the plan for this year is that improved use of data. It's very important that our schools continue to know what the gaps are for their schools. What we do as a local authority is that we share all of the data that we have with our head teachers, and we did that last week at our Head Teachers' Day, and we then ask head teachers to look at that data and to see if it is relevant for their settings. And we've provided additional guidance for our head teachers in our schools in order to do that, and some training from the performance and improvement team to make that happen. Alongside that, we've introduced much better tracking and monitoring systems for schools, so that where they do see a gap, that they know what their interventions might be and what activities they might do to make a difference. Across the authority, we are now going to use that intelligence to start introducing families of schools across Perth and Kinross, but ultimately the plan would be to do that across the Regional Improvement Collaborative, where we look at certain schools which have similar data sets, so that they can collaborate and work together to make improvements and to share that learning. And we know that that will have an impact. So we are looking at target setting for all of our schools, and we're looking at predicted levels of attainment, and that does include raising the bar, because although we've made a difference to close the gap, we know that there are significant improvements that we have to make, particularly in those children in the areas of the highest level of deprivation. But we also have to raise the top level as well. So those children who are performing at the highest level, we need to increase the pace and challenge for them too. And as the Executive Director said, we're doing that in a number of ways. The universal approaches are about what we want to make available to all of our children and young people. And we are very focused right now on working with our head teachers and our teachers on developing a learning and teaching and relationships policy that is a shared standard of what every child and young person can expect in a Perth Kinross school, and how we can develop that learning and teaching that is going to meet the needs of all children within a mainstream school. We've been working really hard to develop strategies and action plans which will support our schools around literacy, numeracy and health and wellbeing as part of the National Improvement Framework. Those strategies have been worked on in collaboration with our schools, but also with a wide range of partners, particularly the health and wellbeing strategy, and that's had a really wide reach from lots of people who we know we need to support our children in our schools. And we've also invested heavily in the continuous professional learning for our teachers, some of which is being delivered through educational psychologists, and again, some in collaboration across the Tayside Collaborative and with Education Scotland. We've got a large range of targeted approaches as well, and the Raising Attainment strategy is probably where most of that sits, and I'll pass over to my colleague Roger to talk a wee bit more about that.
Thank you, Sharon. And to add to that, we are looking at a refresh of the Raising Attainment strategy, which is in development at this stage, and that is our overarching strategy in which everything fits beneath it. We continue with our focus on excellent relationships, excellent learning and teaching, with that focus on improving pedagogy across all aspects of our school system. And so therefore we want to improve that. At the same time, we want to look at improving inclusive practice within the classroom, and that will also be a focus about our statement of inclusive practice that we'll be taking forward. Within the next year, we also want to look at attendance, and we see a slight dip in attendance. We want to focus on attendance and bring our schools to have a sharp focus on attendance, ensuring that our young people are in schools, they're in a position to learn. We want to think about, and we will be taking forward, and we have taken forward, food insecurity during holiday periods, working group with that, looking at from the recent budget motion, and we're taking forward action plans with that and addressing this summer's holiday schemes immediately, with a longer term plan to look at the food insecurity plan over the full course of the year. We also be looking at bringing forward different ways in which we wish to widen access to music instruction, which also has an impact on raising attainment. I also want to focus on the work of the Tayside Regional Improvement Collaborative, and across all the schools across Tayside, we have got a collaborative directory of interventions and outcomes where there have been positive outcomes, and that has been shared. And as Sharon said, the families of schools across the Regional Improvement Collaborative can dip into that collaborative directory to look at where they can find best use of the data and best use of interventions. So I think that's certainly the areas. We'll also be working with our QAMSOs, which are Quality Assurance and Moderation Support Officers, in terms of assuring the quality of our data and quality of our levels of achievement across the primary and secondary stages. So it's a continuing piece of work where we'll continue to have a sharp focus on over the next year.
Thank you very much for that very detailed answer. Thank you.
Could I just add to that, because you'll know that brevity is not the name of anybody that works in education and children's services, particularly not me. But how do you, I was once challenged at a community planning partnership meeting as how do you best raise attainment of a 14-year-old, and I make no apology for giving the same answer today as I gave then. You start 14 years and 9 months earlier. And fundamentally, across education and children's services, with our colleagues in CLD, with our colleagues in youth services, with our colleagues in children's social work and with health, we are serious about starting at the earliest possible stage, and we recognise that we have a role to support pregnant mums and making sure that their health is the best it can be so that their baby's health is the best it can be. And you'll know that that is one of the big areas of our collaborative work. And so the work that we undertake recognises that children don't exist in isolation of their families, and that much of the work that we do in terms of closing the poverty-related attainment gap is often remediation for when gaps and issues have emerged. And that is incumbent on us. We have a statutory duty to do that, but we also take our responsibility in a preventative way very seriously. And the beauty of us being an integrated children's services is it enables us to do that with greater ease.
Convener, can I just thank you very much. I wasn't being flippant at all when I thanked you for the detailed answer. I think everything that's said is really valid. I think the holistic approach is really important. And I think we all take the point that education starts at -9 months. If I dare further ask, in light of what you've said, that what's coming up in paper 7, I think it is, around early years childcare expansion, how important will that be to further closing the poverty-related attainment gap?
What we'll be interested to see in relation to that particular question, Councillor Ribbick, is I think particularly the last few years where we've been able to extend the offer to what have been described as vulnerable 2-year-olds, because that offer hasn't just been about a young person aged 2 coming into a nursery. It's been about what support can be given to the child in the context of their family. And so we'll begin to be able to see in a longitudinal way the kind of impact that we expect that will have been made. And you're absolutely right, that's critically important.
Thank you again.
A broad question and a comprehensive answer. Now, who's next? Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm on page 16 of the report, 242 of our papers, under the subheading of Fairer Futures Commissions. I just wondered if the last sentence there, it says awareness of the cost of the school day was raised with parent councils, and a number of schools are taking forward work on the cost of the school day capitalised. So I just wondered, is that a project can you tell us about?
It is, and there's some general information in relation to looking to tackle what's called the cost of the school day, which can be around resources that youngsters are expected to have coming into school. It can be about uniform, it can be about school bags, it can be about gym kit, it can be about school trips. It can be about fundraising, actually, that for others that's done with the best of intentions but might actually incur a cost, and particularly if you're a brother or sister with lots of other brothers and sisters at a school, then costs can increase. So we have asked now, in fact I think we had the Poverty Commission come to speak to our head teachers in excess of 3 years ago, and there has been quite a bit of work undertaken with real determination to look at tackling some of those issues there. Different schools have focused on different things. Some of it is about looking at trips, some of it is about having a school uniform available within the school at parent council evenings, and the upcycling and the recycling of existing good quality school uniform. So there's a whole range of things underway across a significant number of schools, and this is feeding in also to the statutory duty that all local authorities and health boards now have in relation to tackling child poverty. So the work of the cost of the school day will feature in the first of the reports that Perth and Kinross Council will provide to the Scottish Government about that. So we'll have some case studies included in that, Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Baird.
Thank you. My question's on page 244. It's really about young carers. We talk about the numbers are increasing. Are the numbers increasing, or is it more easy to identify who they are, or are they willing to be identified now?
I think really just for clarification there, I think it's identification, so that actually the situations and the circumstances that children find themselves in and their willingness to talk about that is increasing the numbers that are being identified, not that the numbers are growing. Yeah.
Any questions from our colleagues in the back row? I don't mean that in any discriminatory way, but you okay? Right. Any more questions? Councillor Sarwar, yep, on you go.
Sorry, just following on from the question about the young carers. It says that PKC appointed a young carers worker. If I remember correctly, that was to be within PKC itself. And I just wondered if that's how that's followed through. Is that now part of our remit, or is that something that's been undertaken by PCAFs?
Thanks. I can answer that if you require more detail. I know Hazel Robertson will be able to provide more detail. There are 2 new posts that we've been able to support with the additional monies that have been provided. One is within PCAVs, and that's to support educational attainment of young carers. And the other post is actually a post to support the preparation of young carers statement, and that is within the council and within the team that deals with children with disability.
Okay, are we done with questions? If we are, then I'll formally move the report with a great deal of pleasure. There's a ton of information in here. There's a lot about what we've achieved. There's a lot about what is work in progress, and there's a lot about what our aspiration is to do in the future. Just 1 or 2 highlights. Councillor Ribbick has correctly drawn attention to the literacy and numeracy improvement, and that in itself is absolutely great. On page 238, page 12 of the report, it's pleasing to note that on the 20th of June this year, the Perth Instrumental Music Service tutors, in collaboration with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra and the Royal Scottish National Orchestra musicians, will provide an interactive afternoon concert for 1,200 primary school pupils in Perth Kinross. That's really a great event, and the richness that we get from that is absolutely tremendous, both for those attending and those participating. And that's the thing we want to be shouting from the rooftops about what we're achieving in Perth Kinross. Just going over the page, the parenting and family learning work, the increasing amount of work with parenting, including through their work with the college, Fife College and the Scottish Prison Services, not just Fife Colleges, the colleges and the prison services particularly, really, really important. And if the convener was saying starts off at -9 months, there is a lifelong learning aspect to trying to help people through their lives, especially when they get into difficulties. And just on the youngsters who need special care and attention, the REACH project, I was told on Friday, is verging ahead and really making really good progress. And that's a really fundamental change from the previous Bank House regime to having a team that are virtually on call 25 hours a day, never mind 24 hours a day. And finally, I can't go past mentioning the work of the Child Protection Committee and the supporting mechanisms, and that is another highlight of the report. Are there any, that's me moving the report. Have I a seconder?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm delighted to second this report and make a couple of points. Firstly, we recognise that our budget is tighter with restrictions on the amount of money that we have to spend that's not ring-fenced in our settlement from the Scottish Government. And it makes me proud that our administration have been able to target the money that we do have to specific areas that we know make a real difference to tackling gaps. I don't like that expression, just the attainment gaps across the board. But a key aspect of everything we do is our staff and our teacher reps. I really would ask that you take that back to your colleagues, that we couldn't achieve any of these really positive results in here without the support of all the staff across all of our different services. And I've written here as well about our performance and improvement team. When I started as a councillor back in 2007, I don't think I really had an awful big understanding whether we even had a performance improvement team way back then, because certainly the data and the rich and really refined data that we now have, and that I know that schools have, because every school, and I'm in a school pretty much most weeks, you hear teachers, head teachers, classroom assistants, the secretaries, everyone talking about the data, and they know, and it's so different now to the way it was 12 years ago. So Paul and James and your team, you're no longer the Cinderella of the council now, I don't think. We're definitely well and truly at the party, and long may that continue. And I think for all of us, for our budgets in the future, the investment that we need to make in making sure that we maintain that. Going back to the staff, really impressed by the if for those of us that follow our schools on Twitter, the amount of rich experience that staff have been having with things like the Saturdays, put that out there, Saturdays, digital strategy days that have been done across the Improvement Collaborative, all of that kind of stuff, again, very different now to back 12 years ago. And always at the centre of everything, we do the whole child and their family, and how we can really turn our warm words and reports about making Perth the best place in which to live and grow up, turning that into reality. So with those comments, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. Are there any comments? No comments? Okay. Well, in that case, formally we'll then approve the Education and Children's Services Joint Business Management and Improvement Plan 2019-20 and the Annual Performance Report for 2018-19. And we recommend to the Scrutiny Committee that it scrutinises and comments as appropriate on these two documents. I did see the convener of the Scrutiny Committee pop in for a moment, and he's popped out again. I'm not sure if he was just making sure we're all fully awake and busy attending to our business. But I wasn't able to catch his eye to let him know that we're going to pass some work down the line to him at this point. Okay. I think, convener, that's back to you.
It's actually over to Councillor Duff.
It's to Councillor Duff. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, we move on to item 7 on the agenda on page 287 of your papers. And this is in connection with the expansion of early learning and childcare, and an update on progress in this area, and invite the Executive Director to introduce this report.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. This report provides a summary of the significant work that has been carried out since the last committee report, which was 16th of May 2018, in respect of the planned delivery of 1140 hours of early learning and childcare by 2020. Section 2 of the committee paper outlines the key achievements delivered this year, including details of progress made within the capital and workforce development plans, the early phasing and trialling of different models of delivery across Perth and Kinross, and the results of the engagement activity with key stakeholders. Section 3 of the committee paper provides a summary of the planning in place for next session and the steps which will be taken to ensure full implementation of the expansion plan. In Perth and Kinross, we are ready to move to the next phase and are on track to meet the requirements to deliver the commitment of 1140 hours of ELC by 2020. Further comment, I would just like to say that the scale and scope of this development is significant, and I would just want to, at this point, commend the team who are involved in the planning and the delivery of something of this scale. We're happy to take any questions, Vice Convener.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm interested in the finance of it, and I'm looking at page 289, and it's my question's related to the officer that we got some money to employ. Would that be a temporary post, or do we have to then fund that officer's post from another budget after this money runs out?
My understanding, and I'm looking to the right, but my understanding is that we have budget coming in, both capital and revenue, for us to deliver 1140. And that will be a recurring budget to continue to deliver that, and how we choose to spend that will be up to us, dependent on what our programme of delivery is. So I think what I'm saying is that post can continue within the revenue budget if that's what we want to do, but there may be other options open to us, because as we move through different phases, there'll be different requirements in terms of the kind of support and staff that we want. But I'll check with Sharon that I've got that right.
We did actually receive, obviously, the revenue funding to change the team that's required to deliver early learning and childcare, Councillor Forbes. What we also received was an additional funding after the revenue of £115,000. That was the Realising Potential fund that you've picked out in the report. That was a late addition, if you like, to the funding that we received from the Scottish Government, and that was in recognition, I think, once the programme started, of the scale and the demands that Scottish Government were making on local councils to report and monitor the progress. And they recognised that the funding that we originally got did not include perhaps some of the central funded posts that we would required to have in order for us to make sure that we were monitoring and reporting to them in a timeous manner. So they have given us this extra funding, and it's funded a post until 2021, so a year beyond the initial implementation date. But what we've been doing, as the Executive Director said, is been looking at actually all of the funding that we have and the requirements that we will need beyond that. And we do recognise, as our Executive Director has pointed out, that that demand will not change after 2020. So we are looking to make sure that we have good central support in order for us to make sure that we manage this process well at the centre.
So just to be clear then, the money that we've got for this officer will run out, and we would then be responsible for paying that person after that money's run out. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Could I just say, Councillor Forbes, that by the time we've moved to implementation, the role perhaps of this person will no longer be required, because they'll be somebody who's perhaps project officer support in terms of implementation and development. And so, as Sharon said, there was a recognition that the scale of, you know, the moving to 1140 hours across all of Scotland is probably unprecedented in recent times, and there was a recognition that there was some additional capacity required for that.
Are there any further questions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you very much. My question is around, and it's detailed in Appendix 4, where you're talking about the programme of works, and it mentions that a number of the provisions will require extensions or refurbishments, reconfigurations, etc. Glen Lyon Primary School's mentioned, and I'm just wondering if the reconfiguration that's mentioned there that's been completed, is that in relation to the previously full refurb of the school? Is that what that means, or is there another change?
My understanding is that it's in relation to the nursery element of it.
So the nursery element of the refurb of the school that took place last 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was. Is that correct?
The refurb took place 2 or 3 years ago, but nursery works have taken place since then. Sometimes reconfiguration can be quite minor, and it can be putting in a snack bar or doing an additional toilet. So it may be that if you went up to Glen Lyon, it wouldn't be clear to you what the refurbishment was, but it is done in line with the standards, the Space to Grow standards.
No, it was just personal curiosity, but thank you very much for the answer.
Thank you. Councillor Rebeck, then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I would also like to welcome you to your new role and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
The Scottish Government have quite rightly set a high bar in terms of quality for our children's childcare, quite rightly so. I think it's important, and my question, I guess, relates around the support that we'll give to some of our smaller third-party providers and indeed our childminders in order to be able to get to that bar, because I think to give parents the flexibility that they might require and also the blended approach that we speak about, I think it's really important, although I do know that we do support third-party providers and childminders already, but I think the necessity to continue and indeed improve that support will be really important. I just wonder if there's any comment on that.
Councillor Rebeck, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we have done well, I would say, in all modesty, in Perth and Kinross, and continue to do well, is around the support that is provided for what we term as our partner providers. What we've also recognised, and we would not be able in Perth and Kinross to deliver our commitment without working in partnership and continuing to work in partnership with them. And certainly one of the things we've recognised is that the role of childminders, as we've mentioned before in this chamber, will be critically important to the ongoing expansion, and the same level of support that we provide to our partners would be extended to them. And perhaps Sharon or Ben could just say a wee bit more about what that might actually look like, to give you some comfort that that is within the plans.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. As you know, we do provide quite a lot of what's called in-kind support to our partner providers, and that's reaped very good rewards for us in terms of the quality of early learning and childcare within Perth and Kinross, within our partner providers, remains very high, and it's certainly above the national average, and we want to continue that. Childminders have never been in partnership in Perth and Kinross in the same way, and there are real challenges in terms of childminders. And while we've supported childminders for many, many years in relation to their current role, both for private providers and for childminders, there are two main challenges that we as a council can support them with. The first one is the maintenance of quality and making sure that any plans that we put in place within the local authority are of no detriment to them and their business model, and we've been very careful to do that. So we provide them with the same opportunities for continuous professional development that we do with our own local authority partners. We support them with their workforce planning. But the second main issue for particularly partner providers and for childminders is to look at the business model and how they actually become a partner with local authorities, because now they have to move into a partnership agreement which is new to partner providers and to childminders, and part of the roles that we have undertaken within the centre is to employ contracts and commissioning support, so that we're going round every single partner provider and any childminders who wish to come into partnership with us, and we're helping them to develop their paperwork so that they are ready to come into partnership with us. In relation to childminders, there's a huge step change for them. And what we're really doing with childminders at the moment is really just to make them aware of how we can support them to come into partnership. And that's been a bit of a slow burn, but it's beginning to build much more momentum now as more information is coming out from the Scottish Government, and childminders are coming. And I would have to say that Bernadette Scott, our Service Manager for Early Years, has made that a priority for her time.
Thank you again.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm looking at the Appendix 4 Programme of Works. Will Dumbarnie Primary School at Bridgevern, I see it's down for 2021. Would that be the reason it's not on the this Appendix 4? Is there any plans to do any work at the nursery, which seems to be quite dated, in Portakabins?
The work that is included in Appendix 4 is work that is being funded to deliver 1,140 hours throughout all of our nurseries. We will be able to deliver 1,140 hours at Dumbarnie, but yes, we take on board what you're saying about the nursery. We are aware that it is a life expired building, and it will be considered as part of the capital programme rather than as part of the early years programme.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No. In that case, I'll move to... Sorry, questions were still on? I'm going to move it first, yeah. Okay, thank you. That's okay. Thank you. This report provides members with a progress update on the planning and delivery of early learning and childcare across Perth and Kinross. Council has a duty to offer 1,140 hours of funded early learning and childcare to 3 to 5-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds by August 2020. Paper provides a comprehensive report on progress to date within the 11 early learning and childcare communities, and details the current situation with the capital investment plan and the workforce plan. A significant programme of capital work is in progress and is scheduled to be completed in early 2020. The Council also continues to focus on developing a quality early years workforce with the right skills, flexibility and expertise to deliver the future requirements of early learning and childcare, and very good progress has also been made in this area. The early years team has a key role in ensuring that all funded partner providers deliver high quality experiences for all children and can continue to meet the criteria set out in the national standard. The addition of childminders as partner providers to the Early Learning and Childcare Expansion Plan is a welcome innovation in Perth and Kinross, and work continues to develop this aspect of the plan. The report describes the next steps in the phased implementation of the expansion plan and confirms that the Council is on track to meet the requirements set out within the document, A Blueprint for 2020, Expansion of Early Learning and Childcare in Scotland, and the National Standard. I thank the officers for their continued and excellent efforts in this area and have much pleasure in moving this report. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second this report. I think it's 30 pages, but it reflects a huge amount of work being done by officers. I had the privilege of popping into some of the drop-in sessions at St Ninian's and at Gilton, and having the opportunity to chat with the team and some of the parents that had come along and the staff at those schools, where there's going to be quite dramatic changes with the nursery being included there. I'm not often, looking at Councillor Ribbick, I'm not often praising the Scottish Government, but I do think on this, I think the expansion of early learning and childcare is a really important and significant change in Scottish education, and the way that we provide for those early years, and for some of our really vulnerable children, this is going to be a real dramatic change and improvement to their experience. My only concern is what happens when children then go to school and their parents have had this entitlement to childcare, and everything gets a bit out of kilter. And I had lengthy discussions with Sharon about how we might work with communities and schools to rise to that, which I think will be the next challenge that the government and local authorities will then have to face. So yeah, again, this would only be happening because of the dedication and commitment of our staff, and we owe them a great deal of thanks for that.
Thank you, Convener. We'll move to comments. Councillor Ribbick.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Firstly, I think it is really important that we do owe a big debt of gratitude to Sharon Johnson in particular and her team, because I know this work has been challenging, but it is worthwhile. I know that this has been a big undertaking, but I think we're really delighted that we've got very detailed plans now, and indeed we're seeing bricks being laid, not least in Letham, if I'm allowed to be parochial just for a second. I think there'll be further challenges to come because we don't actually know what level of demand there is. I'm sure we've overestimated it in some places and underestimated in others, but I think we're starting from a pretty good place. I think it's also worth noting the work done by the Tayside Regional Improvement Collaborative. Actually, I think it's really important that there's a degree of consistency between Perth and Kinross, Dundee and Angus, and I think that's to be commended. But I make no apologies in enthusiastically commending the Scottish Government in regards to this national policy. I believe it will be truly transformational for our country. I have spoken before about it helping parents escape in-work poverty, but it should not be mistaken for a babysitting service. It's about making sure all children have the opportunity to the highest quality childcare. The idea that nursery is about playing with toys and P1 is about formal education should be consigned to the past. Early years childcare expansion is about the introduction of play-based learning from an early age, and it is ensuring a seamless transition from nursery to primary. Dare I say it, it really is about getting it right for every child. And the Scottish Government is putting its money where its mouth is, with £29 million invested in Perth and Kinross to make sure we're able to bring this ambition to reality. I appreciate the convener's comments. I said 2 years ago that it's entirely appropriate to commend political opponents where it's appropriate, and I appreciate the convener's comments. But we in the SNP group would like to underline the hard work done by Sharon Johnson and her colleagues, and we are delighted to commend this excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ribbick. Are there any other comments? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I would like to also join the support of the convener and Councillor Ribbick in their support of the officers, and it is a very comprehensive report, and actually a lot of the detail that some of us might have wanted 2 years ago when we were asking about some of this stuff is all here now, and it's really useful, and actually it helps us to conceptualise and visualise what it's going to look like. you know, as would be expected from me, perhaps, I'm still, you know, wanting more in some of my rural communities, and I'm not going to, you know, make apologies about asking for more. And I'm pleased that the council is exploring an extra provision at Logie rate as part of the school estate review. I think that's a very positive thing, and I hope we'll see more of that as the early learning and childcare is rolled out across Perth and Kinross. And I think once people become aware of their entitlement, they will start to want to use it in different ways, and we'll see, as Councillor Reddick says, in some areas we will underestimate it, in some areas we'll overestimated it, but actually I think this is quite a firm grounding to start from, and I think it's a very positive policy generally, not just for parents in work poverty, as Councillor Reddick talks about, and I've got many personal experiences in my own ward that have been relayed to me about how this policy is going to help allow people to actually have a job where they can't get childcare at the moment, because as Councillor Duff's probably aware in our ward, it's pretty much impossible to get childcare in lots of parts of it. So very supportive of the policy in general, and very pleased to see the detail here, and you know, thanks to officers for the amount of work that has gone into this, because it is no small piece of work, so thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I don't want to ruin the bonhomie between the Convener and Councillor Rubbick, which is always a joy to hear. However, whilst colleagues in all parties within the Council were keen to get this going and get it funded, it took a wee while for some colleagues in Holyrood just to catch up and get the message. However, we are where we are now, which is really good. And I think, just to reflect Councillor McDade's point, the flexibility of this is good. Reaching out to rural communities is absolutely essential. And I often say that poverty isn't just about money. It can be about distance, it can be about lack of contact, it can be about loneliness, it can be a whole range of different things. And there's an impressive programme now. Some of the folk who are burning midnight oil on this have been burning midnight oil on other things as well. And I just want to pay tribute to whoever they are and whatever the bit of ECS and other services they're involved in. It's really heartening to see it. And it is transformational. It's something that is going to make a huge difference, especially to working mums, working dads. We sometimes forget about working dads. And the ability to allow folk flexibility of choice in doing something different in the morning or something different in the afternoon. And also the expansion into 45 and 50 weeks, combined with our efforts to help families who are in need have meal provision during the holidays, is really going to make a big difference. And it'll be interesting to see. I hope some university research folks are going to study a before and after on this, because I think this sociologically could make an excellent big improvement in health and well-being, and all sorts of ways for young people and families throughout Scotland.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? No, if that's the case, can we agree the recommendations of the report? Thank you. And back to the Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Paper 8 in front of you is the school clothing and footwear grants. I'll ask Sheena Devlin to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Convener. By way of introduction to the report, I would just want to outline that local authorities have a statutory duty to provide support to enable families to buy school clothing and other essential items required for school. Whilst the Scottish Government has set a national minimum payment level for school clothing grants, it is in fact for local authorities to set the eligibility criteria that they apply to determine who can in fact apply for a grant. This report sets out revised criteria for Perth and Kinross for determining the eligibility for school clothing grants, which aligns with the national qualifying benefits used to determine entitlement to free school meals. At the council meeting on the 20th of February earlier this year, additional funding was agreed to expand the eligibility criteria for school clothing grants as a positive step in tackling child poverty across Perth and Kinross. So this proposal today broadens the eligibility for school clothing grants, meaning that more parents and carers will receive the full grant. This will ensure that those families who currently receive free school meals as a result of a qualifying benefit will now also be able to receive a school clothing grant. And we're happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions, Councillor McEwen?
Excuse me. I have 3 questions. Do you want me, as with previous, want me to answer one to one, and then? So the first question I have: receiving a benefit always brings a level of stigma and a barrier to applying. Low uptake and therefore a dilution of the educational benefits these grants aim to achieve. How will successful recipients receiving the grant get the money, and what mechanisms are we going to employ to maximise uptake and support those having difficulty in applying?
Would you just run through, I know that was one question, but I think there were 3 parts, Councillor McEwen, to your first question. So just run through all those parts for me again. Thank you.
So, how are they going to receive their money? What mechanisms are we going to use to maximise uptake? And how are we going to support those who have difficulty in filling in application forms, etc., etc.?
Councillor McEwen and I had a longer conversation about this last night, so he has refined it down to just 3 brief points now.
I'll ask Karen Robertson to pick up on that, and then I can add some bits and pieces to that if necessary as well. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Just to clarify, the process that we have in place, which we will continue with, is that parents receive the money directly into their bank account or a nominated bank account if they don't have a bank account. There are processes in place to be able to cash a cheque at a post office if necessary, but that's very few and far between, and in exceptional circumstances where they can't identify a bank account. We have moved on significantly from how we operate school clothing grants. When I first came to the council, people were given vouchers to take to particular shops, and only those shops could be used, and you had to buy what they sold. We then moved to gyros, which people then had to take in cash as well. So there has been a progressive movement to try and streamline the process so that parents are giving us that information and we pay it very quickly directly into their bank account, so it's a much more secure way of dealing with that. In terms of future plans for school clothing grants, the council has a transformation project for online and digital forms, and our free school meals and clothing grants is part of that project that the council is looking at. And whilst at the moment parents can apply online to the council, but we do realise that they have to, we have to remind people, they have to remember to apply. What we're looking to try and do to maximise that uptake is now, through the online project, establish how we can use benefit data that the council holds for other purposes, and how we can match that to the pupil and parent data that Education and Children's Services holds for different purposes, to move towards having a position of us knowing who the eligible parents are, because at the moment people who are eligible, if they apply, they will get, but there may be people who are eligible that we don't know. So we are on a journey of trying to move towards potentially almost an automated and automatic process that parents wouldn't have to apply, that we would know who they were and their children that are in school, and tie that up together. So that is what we're moving towards. In terms of maximising the uptake, we are taking a lot of steps in terms of pushing relevant council information out through social media channels. So we know that lots of parents maybe don't read school handbooks, they don't take it upon themselves to go looking on the council website, but we do know that social media seems to be quite a positive way for parents to share with other parents or family members, to share with people that they know that have children at school. So we're trying to be more proactive about getting those kind of messages out at the right time, to keep these reminders in place for parents. And obviously we have, in relation to people who have difficulties in filling out the forms, we do have a council, people can come to the council and people will assist currently in filling out forms or getting information that they don't have. So we do at the moment have some issues with people not bringing their correct benefit information as entitlement, so we can assist in getting that for them if they've got difficulties, or help people with filling out forms.
And with my background reading, I did understand all of that, so that's quite good. Thank God for background reading. So, second question. I think it's one question, anyway. There are some people who will just miss the criteria for this. I think if you're with an employer for less than 2 years, you get a maternity allowance, which will put you just over the amount that will qualify you by something like £15 a month or something. So what non-cost options are we going to use to improve access to uniforms, like nearly new recycling, uniform policies that reduce costs, spread costs, targeted free uniforms?
We're smiling because this has been a big focus across our senior management team, not least in relation to the fact that, of course, there'll be a new school opening in August, Bertha Park High School, that doesn't have a uniform. And so one of the challenges that we set to the head teacher was, when we knew that the allowance was £100, to make sure that the uniform for Bertha Park High School could be bought with that amount of money, and that's a challenge that has actually been met. So I think that's really important, that we're able to sort of not just talk the talk, but walk the walk in that regard. And so there's a range of, as Karen said, it's now not limited to certain shops with certain vouchers, but actually it is possible to have the appropriate uniform. Part of that, though, is also about schools being realistic and reasonable about what their uniform, if they have a policy or a strategy or approach or guidance is. And we've been working on that with them through the work I mentioned earlier in response to Councillor Sarwar's question about the cost of the school day, because that's a really important part. And a number of schools, actually for a long period of time, have actually been very assiduous in terms of the recycling and the sharing of uniforms. And now it's much more obvious, open, and there's lots of sales happen, usually organised by parent councils rather than staff, but some staff are involved as well, and that's something that we're promoting through reducing the cost of the school day.
Thank you. My final question, which you might be able to answer or not. The over 16-year-olds get education maintenance allowance, and that's an incentive for them to stay on in full-time education to maximise their learning and obviously make their positive destinations as good as possible. They won't be included in this paper to receive the grant. What numbers are we talking about in Perth Kinross? Because we're talking 16 to 19-year-olds who fit the criteria for free school meals, etc. So what's the sort of numbers that we're talking about who would not be getting this grant, having got it when they were 15?
I don't know if we've actually got the information of the numbers of youngsters who are entitled to EMAs with us here, but we can certainly get that for you, Councillor McEwen. It's an interesting thing because the clothing grant allowance covers the statutory period of school, so from 5 to 16. But as I said in my introduction, local authorities can actually set the eligibility criteria, and of course what we've done through the budget process is that we did some calculations as to if we were to expand the eligibility criteria as we did, what would the likely uptake of that expansion be, and there was money made available through the budget process to cover that. So similarly, if it was thought in this local authority that youngsters who are entitled to EMA should also be entitled, we could easily do a calculation on what that would cost additionally, and that might be something that people wanted to, politicians wanted to factor into the budget process next year. But in terms of the actual numbers right now, I don't have that information to hand, but I can certainly get that for you.
Any further questions? Councillor Illingworth.
Just a quick one. How many grants for footwear and school uniform are issued approximately per year?
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. It's, we have contained within the paper, it's approximately 1,350. Sorry, 1,350.
Councillor McDade.
Yeah, it's really just to follow up on something the Executive Director said about the cost of uniform. Do we have an average cost of uniforms across Perth and Kinross? As in, do we know what the average cost is?
I don't think there is such a thing as an average cost, because it would absolutely be, determined by where you purchased.
I know, but say, some schools, for example, require blazers, which are obviously quite expensive items, whereas, as you say, others have been quite good at keeping their uniform more generic, which obviously has a massive cost difference. But I just wondered if there had been a piece of work in relation to this that had been done around the cost in different schools.
I'm not aware that we've looked at and worked out what the average cost would be, but what we do know is that even with a blazer, there are a range of options that are not necessarily prohibitively expensive in terms of blazers. And we would be encouraging schools to go for a wide range of options. But in terms of an average cost, I don't have that information, no.
Any further questions? No. In moving this report, I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able, as an administration, to bring this report forward. Pay tribute to former Vice Convener Ros McCall, who was the person who discovered that we weren't, this eligibility criteria was not applying across Perth and Kinross, and lobbied Sheena and myself quite hard on it. So our thanks to Ros for bringing that forward, and then to Sheena for working with officers to bring this paper forward. In the report, it says that it is anticipated that this change may benefit up to a further 300 primary and secondary pupils. That is not an insignificant number of pupils. And if any councillors haven't read it, the Fairer Futures report, I'm a big believer that we should never just commission these reports, have them all printed at great expense and then put them on a shelf to get dusty, and that we should be constantly going back and reviewing the recommendations in reports such as this. Section 4, I think it is specifically on our area of business for this committee about giving children the very best opportunities and start in life, and certainly from our administration's point of view, the opportunity to give families the hand up when they need it at crucial stages, particularly transition up to high school. The cost can be significant. It's not a case of nipping to Asda and getting their school uniform deal because the blazer's not necessarily for sale there. So actually being able to do it in a dignified way rather than, because I can remember from personal experience, the voucher that you had to take to the certain shop, because my school Lindsay Academy had a very strict school blazer policy, and it was just going to be beyond our family's means, and that was a fair few years ago. So it is a very real experience for many families, and if we as a council can do something to help them at that point and help those children get that good start, then that's something that we should always strive to do. And I look forward to perhaps a bit more cross-party working on documents such as the Fairer Futures proposal, so that we can address all of the recommendations that are in that, or as many of them as we can. So with that, I'm happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Convener, I'm very happy to second this report. In my seconding of the report, I'm going to refer to section 4 of the Fairer Futures report, which was entitled A Strong Start and Equal Footing for Life, Chances, Choices and Confidence. And I pick out 2 sentences out of that section in particular. The very first sentence was, poverty is unfair. It impacts on children, families and communities and feeds the conditions which lead to the deprivation and disadvantage. And later on in that section, being able to pay for essentials and opportunities is very important to all parents and carers. In particular, the cost of the school day can be difficult to manage in terms of school meals, uniforms, equipment, trips, sport clubs and other fun activities. These experiences are all important parts of a child's development which allow them to learn, develop social skills and pursue interests and hobbies out with this school. This report does exactly that and addresses these points, and I'm very happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ahern. Can I ask if there's any comments on the report? Councillor McEwen, Councillor Rebick.
Convener, I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to discuss this paper today. School clothing grants don't often make the headlines, but these grants play an extremely important positive contribution to those who receive them. These grants are part of the improvements needed to reduce the attainment gap and improve educational outcomes. School clothing and footwear grants help reduce parental stress and pressure, which is felt by children and helps create a stronger school-home relationship. Increasing the awareness and supporting parents is very important, as this will improve grant uptake, which is key to the whole system. Increasing uniform wearing and reducing difference and stigma develops happier children, ready to learn, with a sense of belonging to the school as a whole, and an increased participation in learning that improves their attainment. A report by the Child Poverty Action Group, The Cost of the School Day, mentions different approaches by different councils in Scotland. One example which grabbed my attention was the Automated School Grants Awards adopted by Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow City Council, and I look forward to the future of PKC exploring this option and removing the need for parents to apply and the barrier and stigma that this often entails. The Poverty Truth Commission also did a report looking at the real cost, and they've estimated the real cost at £130. And I think this is something that we should explore and consider going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we should also in the future explore the look of taking away the ceiling at 16-year-olds. I think 16-year-olds, when they're growing like weeds and having to buy adult clothes, have very expensive clothing to buy. And I think taking it out the £30 a week sort of dilutes the benefit that that system has. So I think that's something, again, we need to look at going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKeown, I think it may be appropriate at some point for us to bring back a piece of work, perhaps done cross-party on this, for a future committee to discuss and look at options. Councillor Rebick.
Thank you. It was really just to support Councillor McKeown's ambitions for Emma recipients to receive the school clothing footwear grant, and also to move, hopefully in future, to some kind of automated system of grants. And yes, I would very much like to welcome your I think, offer of cross-party working group on this matter. I think that would be really important. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes and then Councillor McDade.
Convener, I was going to congratulate you on picking up this anomaly and bringing it forward, but it seems that I should be congratulating Councillor McCall instead of you. But I think this is an excellent paper and an excellent thing to bring forward, and I'm just delighted that you and your colleagues picked up on it, and disappointed, of course, that the previous administration didn't. Thank you very much.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to welcome your offer of working on cross-party basis on the future on opportunities like this, and I think that we'd all welcome that.
Any further comments? In closing, I would just add that I remember vividly Councillor Dugan asking Councillor Campbell what our vision was as administration. These type of things were a key part of that vision that Ian brought when he took over as leader back in whenever that was, 2017. And it is exactly this kind of giving people a hand up when they need it most that this administration is supportive of. And I genuinely hope that we can look at reviewing the Fairer Futures document and these other pieces of work that are being done to try and do everything we can to really make that reality for families across Perth and Kinross. So with that, I'll move the paper. Thank you. Which takes us on to item 9, appointments to committees, subcommittees and the Educational Trust. Can we agree that Dean McBride and Jack Bell replace Robert McCall and Fraser MacDonald as the youth reps on the committee? And further, can we thank Robert and Fraser for all that they did? And knowing Dean and Jack, we're in for some positive views there from those two. Can we note Councillor Duff will replace Councillor Purvis on the Executive Subcommittee?
Can I just query that? We've previously appointed members of the Exec Sub at full council. I'm just querying whether it's... Okay, it has been at the full council as well, but I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, thank you.
Without being too petty about it, I think we've already done that, given he sat on it on Monday.
He was substituting, but thanks for keeping on top of it at 3 hours into the meeting, Councillor Rebick. And can we agree the appointment of Councillor Duff to the Perth and Kinross Educational Trust Committee that has not yet met? And one final item of business, I'm going to ask Sheena Devlin if she will give us a verbal update on the Tri-School.
Thank you, Convener. Previous discussion at this committee, there had been an aspiration expressed by some members of the committee that we be able to bring an update in relation to work that's been undertaken focusing on looking at the feasibility or otherwise of establishing a tri-school. And we had said that we were unsure as to whether we could meet that requirement or not, and there was discussion that it might be around a special committee meeting this side of recess. The reality is that the pre-consultation events don't actually stop until it's either the 7th or the 9th of June.
It's the online questionnaire.
Yeah.
Sheena,
Is it
that
the
finishes
7th or
on the
9th of
7th.
June?
Yeah.
The 7th of June. So until such time as all of that information is completed, we wouldn't be in a position to bring back any sort of detailed information to you. But we will arrange to have information to people the other side of the recess just as soon as we're able to.
Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you, Sheena. That brings us to the end of the committee for this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you.